come to order on the June 3rd open session of tonight's City Council meeting. The time is 6:05, but because it was windy, we'll count it as 6. Would you please call the roll?
I would be delighted to. Councilmember Keldorf. Here. Councilmember Giroux.
Here.
Councilmember Boyles.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Baldino.
Here.
And Mayor Pimentel.
Here.
Thank you.
And please rise. Pastor McKenna from the bridge, if you'd like to lead us with the invocation, followed by Councilmember Boyles with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, tonight as our city meets and our leadership, Lord God, as I always pray, I'm thankful for our city officials, Lord God, our council, our mayor, Lord God, the administrators. And Lord, I'm also reminded tonight that how great a city that we live in. And Lord, sometimes that we can take things that we have here for granted. And I pray that we wouldn't do that. Lord, we would be thankful for all that you've given us. And Lord, tonight I'm also carrying the weightiness of seeing things unfold across our nation where violence is happening, people are being hurt and killed. And so, Lord, tonight I specifically pray for protection over our city. Lord God, that you would watch over the residents here, Lord, those that come and go to work. And Lord, I specifically pray for our first responders, especially our police officers, that you would give them wisdom and discernment, Lord God, as they watch over our city, as they keep it safe. And Lord, that you would cover this city, that you would protect it, Lord God. And Father, thank you for the residents of this amazing community. Thank you for the families, Lord God, the moms, the dads, the children, Lord God, our schools and our teachers. Lord, thank you for our city maintenance workers and how you have given us such a beautiful city to live in and how they take care of it, Lord God. And so tonight as we do business, Lord, for our city, I pray that you would just give oversight to the leadership tonight, Lord God, that decisions would be made, Lord God, that would bring glory to you, and Lord God, and Father, that you would be in the midst of this meeting tonight. We pray this in your name. Amen.
All right, please face the flag and join me in the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pastor McKenna, thank you very much, and thank you, Councilmember Boyles. We have 4 special presentations to start the meeting today. We'll start with the Juneteenth Celebration Day. Councilmember Boyles.
All right, we have a proclamation celebrating Juneteenth. Whereas the nation was founded on the principles stated in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but in which people who were African American were held in slavery for many years. And whereas President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, which holds that all persons held as slaves within a state or designated part of a state shall be thenceforward, forever free, changing the legal status of 3.5 million enslaved African Americans from slave to free. And whereas the Emancipation Proclamation paved the way for the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which formally abolished slavery in the United States of America. And whereas news of the Emancipation Proclamation did not reach the most distant slave states until 2.5 years later, being read in Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865. And whereas the Day of Respect and Remembrance called Juneteenth, a combination of the words June and 19th is observed as an important day in our nation's history. And whereas Juneteenth commemorates African American freedom while also serving as a reminder of the inequities faced by African Americans throughout our nation's history, and whereas El Segundo recognizes that a diverse community founded on shared values and community spirit is our strength and opportunity for the future. Now, therefore, the mayor and members of the City Council of the City of El Segundo, California, hereby proclaim June 19, 2025 as Juneteenth Celebration Day and urge all citizens to celebrate our diversity, to recognize the strength of a rich culture, and experience the African American heritage. This celebration acknowledges the history of an important part of American society and helps unify our city and our nation as a whole. And it's signed by the mayor and the members of the City Council. And I don't believe anyone is here today to receive this.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyles. Director Mancini. For the 2025 Summer Concert in the Park Series, please.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. Well, I'm excited. Summer is upon us. It's hard to believe. And we will be kicking off our very popular Summer Concerts in the Park series in just a couple of weeks on Sunday, June 15th, which is Father's Day, I believe. And our concert series will run for 8 weeks with a concert every other week during the summer. And concerts will begin, the activities will begin at 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoons, with music starting at 4:30. We'll have activities for kids, food trucks, and of course, great music. So all of the summer concert bands can be found on our Recreation Parks website at www.esrecparks.org. You can find the full lineup. And also, we are looking for residents that might be interested in starting each concert singing the national anthem. So if anybody is interested in that, please contact Ryan Delgado, our recreation supervisor at the Joslin Center, and we look forward to a great series. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Mancini. Next up, we have something fun. Chief Avery, would you join us with Chief Sefke for the retirement of Clayton Holt?
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. I am very proud and honored to have worked with Clayton Holt, who stands before me or behind me. He was absolutely the epitome of fitness. He actually worked out with Lou Ferrigno. I heard there's a story about that. And he also is an absolute example of hardworking firefighter for us and another leader of compassion for our community, just like the rest of your firefighters standing behind me. So I do want to bring Battalion Chief Evan Sifke to tell a story about him because they came on the same day 23 and a half years ago.
Good evening. Appreciate the opportunity to say a few things about our newest retired member, Clayton Holt. Engineer Holt was hired as a firefighter with the City of El Segundo on January 11th, 2002. I personally worked side by side as a firefighter with Clayton for 2 weeks while deployed on the Southern California firestorms of 2003. His strength and previous wildland experience that he brought to the deployment was an asset to the team. He was promoted to the rank of fire paramedic in November of 2015. During his time as a paramedic, Clayton was known for his compassion and taking the extra time with the patients under his care to ensure that they felt comfortable and cared for. He has performed confidently and professionally in some of the most stressful medical calls. His expertise is to be commended. A couple of stories that they passed along to me, some people just remember him for holding patients' hands and just making them feel really comfortable and cared for and the focus of his attention. So in June of 2019, he was promoted to the rank of fire engineer, where he carried out the remaining years of his career. His most recent noteworthy event was his deployment to the Palisades fire, driving and pumping Engine 32 as part of the South Bay strike team, courageously helping save countless homes. After nearly 23 and a half years of dedicated service to the City of El Segundo, Engineer Holt retired effective May 30th, 2025. On behalf of the men and women of the El Segundo Fire Department, we wish you a fulfilling and health-filled retirement. You will be missed.
Oh, don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. Chief Sefke, if you want to present the plaque, please.
Oh, yeah. Wow. All right. Well, I gotta say a few words.
Oh, you got the mic.
Just overwhelmed with gratitude, and I feel like in many ways coming to the City of El Segundo was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. And I'll always look back to the times I spent with all the firefighters and the members of the city council and the people who live here. It's a really wonderful community to be a part of, and it's a big part of who I am, and I thank you all from the bottom of my heart. My life could not be any better, and that's a big part of being here. Thank you. Yeah, come on up. Come on up. Wow. Come on up.
All right. Councilmember Keldorf for Mattel's International Day of Play proclamation.
How fun. All right, proclamation by the City of El Segundo. Whereas June 11th is recognized by the United Nations as International Day of Play, celebrating the importance of play to the development of children worldwide, and play is a fundamental right of every child and powerful driver of development, creativity, and emotional well-being, helping shape confident, compassionate, and capable individuals. And whereas for 80 years, Mattel has been a global leader in play, enriching the lives of children with an iconic brand, fostering imagination, discovery, and lifelong memories across generations, and positively impacting communities worldwide. And whereas Mattel has been a driving force in championing the International Day of Play through innovative programming, advocacy, and outreach, demonstrating how play can be a unifying force that transcends language, borders, and backgrounds. And Mattel's Play It Forward initiative embodies its deep-rooted commitment to give back to children in underserved communities around the world. And whereas Play It Forward Global Volunteer Week is a designated period each year where Mattel's global offices host a week of opportunities for employees to share their time and talents to support their local communities. With participation from over 30 global offices impacting thousands of children and benefiting more than 100 nonprofits worldwide, the occasion has quickly grown to support Mattel's volunteer and philanthropic efforts all over the world. And whereas in the City of El Segundo, Play It Forward Week events will include June 10th, Mattel Volunteers, building over 1,000 play kits, and on June 11th and 12th, June Epic Camp Mattel themed play days with 600 kids from the Boys and Girls Club of America, Save the Children, Easter Seals of Southern California, Good Plus Foundation, including children affected by the January 2025 wildfires, featuring major Los Angeles sports teams that also call El Segundo home, such as the LA Kings, as well as the LA Football Club, LAFC, ASMOA, Inner City Arts, the Los Angeles Natural History Museum, Los Angeles Public Library Foundation, and Project Camp coming together to host the ultimate play date at Mattel's El Segundo headquarters. Now, therefore, on this third day of June 2025, the Mayor and members of the City Council of the City of El Segundo hereby proclaim June 11th International Day of Play in El Segundo, and the week of June 9th to the 13th as Mattel's Play It Forward Volunteer Week, and further commend the Mattel Children's Foundation and their participation and significant support to the community, and Mattel for 80 years of leadership, innovation, and generosity, and for its outstanding contributions to children, families, and the power of play. Mattel's numerous contributions for the benefit of all residents of Los Angeles County make them a cornerstone for the advancement of youth in our city. Thank you very much to Mattel, and to accept the proclamation is Corinne Murat, Director of Government Affairs. If you want to come on up and say a few words.
Thank you for the recognition. Good evening, Mayor Pimentel, members of the City Council. Humbling, all that. Thank you. I'm honored tonight to accept this special recognition on behalf of all of the nearly 1,800 Mattel employees in El Segundo. We are proud to call El Segundo home of our global headquarters, and we're engaged in our community where we live, work, and play, all of us daily. We have recently reaffirmed our commitment to El Segundo, and some of you may have heard already, with a significant investment in a new building, a new facility, and a global design center on Nash and Grant that will replace our facility on Mariposa. We're looking forward to many more years working in El Segundo together. The toy industry presence in town has also expanded significantly, and we're proud to be that anchor. Recently, El Segundo was recognized for its creative industry, and it was referenced as Barbie Beach. So we thought that was fitting, but there are so many contributions to that in El Segundo. This year, you mentioned, marked 80 years since Mattel started in a garage. And we are celebrating the occasion with 80 moments for 80 years, including next week, where we will have 600 kids over 2 days to celebrate International Day of Play, and we are very excited about welcoming all of them, and I hope some of you as well to come and join us. The United Nations celebrates now International Day of Play on June 11th. Their theme is Choose Play Every Day, and I hope we will all do that and play together. Thank you.
Councilmember Pierstick and I went to the International Day of Play last year. It was eerily quiet behind Mattel, just completely quiet. And then you heard this ominous rumble of school buses. And then it was like Pickett's Charge, this wave of 10-year-old humanity. It was awesome. And with that, public communications.
We have one this evening, Mr. Mayor, not related to an agenda item. I would like to invite Tom Russ to please come up.
4 minutes, Tom.
Good evening, Mayor Pimentel, members of the council. I'm Tom Russ. I'm speaking on behalf of the El Segundo Amateur Radio Group, which provides additional emergency communications to the city in case of major disasters. And the particular item is that we are again going to be participating in Field Day, which is an emergency communications exercise that takes place across the United States and Canada, and we practice operating from an improvised location. And as in past years, we will be doing this from Hilltop Park, and it gives us the ability to practice skills, make contacts with other radio groups, and they do this in a contest format. And so I would like to invite any of the elected leaders to stop by sometime while we're operating. It gives us an extra 100 points in our contest. This will be the last weekend in June, that will be June 28th and 29th. We'll be in Hilltop Park operating for about 24 hours from around 11 a.m. Saturday to 11 a.m. Sunday. So if you're insomniacs, you can come in the middle of the night. We'll have someone there. But yeah, this does give us a chance to make sure that the equipment that we have in the city for this support is operating, and that we have not forgotten how to work the different radios that we will be using. And will be set up in Hilltop Park, and also gives us a little bit of public recognition for that. So it'd be nice if anyone could come by.
Tom, question for you. Is that still in the donated trailer? Are we still in the same trailer?
It is still the donated
with
truck.
with the paneled
Yes.
one? So, city manager, as we do the recruitment for the emergency manager, with the last emergency manager, that was an initiative that went fallow. Sort of, that's a 25-year-old truck or trailer. Even though it has that generator, we run it off shore power still, right? We wire it into the park.
It has 3 methods of power. It has onboard batteries, it has a shore power connection, and it has a gasoline power generator that is in the truck.
Yeah, it's a key part of our emergency management plan, and it's still got a VCR in it, so it's a bit dated in there, and it's cycled through on replacement. As you remember, it gets pretty warm in there when you've got about 5 or 6 bodies working the radios. So there's all kinds of modern amenities that we could look at, and probably at a very affordable rate to repair that. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, well, would certainly be happy to work with the new emergency manager when they hear about anything related to that.
Thank you very much. All right, that's our only public comment. Well, with that, we will be on to item A, procedure of motions. I will take a motion to read all ordinances and resolutions on the agenda by title only.
Boyle, so moved.
Second. Drew, second. All in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Consent calendar, do we have any pulls?
Can I pull number 7, please?
We both can.
I was gonna do my first poll.
Oh, look at that.
And I would also like to pull number 9.
7 and 9. For public health, anything for you, Councilmember Boyles? All right, I will take a motion to approve item 5, 6, 8, and 10.
So moved.
Boyles so moved. Drew Keldorf on the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Sorry, aye.
Nope. All right, 5-0. Item 7, over to you, Mayor Pro Tem.
This item is great for El Segundo. It is basically an agreement to get reimbursed for the installation of our local travel network. The idea is phase 1 was kind of putting the signs up around town. Out-of-pocket cost maybe $17,000 because we co-located some of those on existing poles, which is great. Phase 2 is more about connecting us to neighboring communities. I pulled this because I want to make sure that we're not budgeting, and the budget is about $200,000 for consultants. And while consultants are great and they're needed, I don't want to spend a bunch of money to have some consultant come to us and tell us what they think is great, to have us say, you know what, that doesn't look great to us because that's not how we get around. One example I have is if you look at page 59 of 427, we've got the phase 2 gap designs, and the new design is to get us to Manhattan Beach by the coast and get us to our neighbors coming down, it looks like Douglas. I would think it makes sense to add to this a line on Nash that we could take from Grand or Mariposa to go to Nash, and then we can take Nash behind Raytheon by the Chargers and end up at the golf course. It makes sense to drive a golf cart to the golf course. So I don't know if there's an appetite for I hate to use the word ad hoc committee, but I would like there to be local input and control over this money we're spending on people to tell us which streets are safe to drive on, because people who live in town, we have a pretty good idea of that.
Have I got a deal for you?
Oh, sign me up.
So we torture this thing at the COG transportation meeting, which is where this money comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the one positive thing. And my problem with this is that there are two macro phases to the development. And every time we go to the regional meeting, they discuss phase 1 as connecting us, and it has to be 35 mile an hour and below streets, connecting us east, down Douglas, and to the eastern part of Manhattan Beach, and then from there, east to Hawthorne. Which, you know, if you want to pick a route, that's fine. But what our case, and I know Elias and I, you're both in the same meeting, that we continually make to the COG, is that no one is taking their golf cart over to Douglas to go down under the railroad tracks, to pop up to go to Trader Joe's or something in Manhattan Beach. The phase 2 portion of this is the one that would connect by engineering study, which I think the consultancy piece is for the engineering study on this, to use the old county road, which goes on the east side of the power plant on the beach, and connect to El Porto. My contention is that if we are going to approve this, we should flip phase 1 and phase 2. And I know you've heard me say that a million times at the meeting, and they all, Wally, who I love, they all nod their head. And then it keeps coming back the same way, telling me phase 1 is going to drive us on a golf cart down to Douglas, which no one is going to do. So if we are going to approve this, I would strongly say we would approve this only if you were going to connect us to El Porto on the beach route. And we can deal with the city of LA to get us down the west part of Grand. But to do the engineering study so that that county road that runs between Vista Del Mar and the power plant, and utilize that. Otherwise, I see no value in creating a local travel network that is theoretically going to take people on golf carts from here to the Toyota skating rink. It's just not going to happen.
Do we have that authority or is that up to the COG to dictate?
Well, we do the work, and then they reimburse us for that work. So I don't think they've any...
There's some history here. Back when I was chair of the COG, that was the approach. With the one that you're proposing, Chris, was the same approach we had proposed going along the beach 4 or 5 years ago. So that hasn't changed. It's kind of a strange arrangement with the COG because They direct funds, they help us with consulting. But I agree with everyone who's spoken before me that it doesn't really make sense unless we go along the beach and we get the approval to do that. That's been actually, we were looking at Vista Del Mar at one point, but there's safety concerns because of the speed of travel, prevailing speed of travel on that street. But so, yeah, I agree. I think we should not be looking at Douglas.
So, yeah, if we're going to approve spending $900,000 and taking the reimbursement, I would prefer to use that $900,000 to study a route that people will use.
No, I agree. I like the idea of flipping the phases, but I think we have to have Douglas in there because they want us to connect to Metro, right? This is last mile component of all of this, right?
The local travel network did not have a last mile component. That was not a piece of it. I think these things just keep getting added on. You know, the Good Idea Fairy sprinkles the magic powder, I've said my piece. Councilmember Keldorf, you were the one who wanted to pull this.
Well, no, and I had asked the city manager this question, but and we're talking about it now. I have no issue approving the money, but I didn't know if this conversation was also about how to utilize the money. So this is the direction I wanted to go in as well. I saw something specifically in the staff report that mentioned a parking analysis, and it's, my personal pet peeve to have these spots that are reserved for golf carts around the city that are often either empty or parked with an SUV anyway. So I just wanted us to have this conversation in more detail about what we would actually be spending that close to $1 million on.
Director Sassoon, Councilmember Giroux is the only one who has not yet thrown something at you. Would you like to speak now or wait for
all
him?
the darts have been thrown?
That's fine.
I agree. I agree with your
in the Star
assertion
Chamber.
on that.
Your
So, now go.
So very briefly, as everybody knows, we implemented the pilot project for LTN, and we had great publicity about that. But we did it very, very quickly. There was not enough time for us to do a reach out and get the input from community. I worked with the environmental committee. We advertised to the best of our ability, but South Bay COG, they really wanted to implement that very, very quickly. And as city manager he's here, he agrees with me. They really put a lot of pressure on us to get that implemented. In fact, the pressure was so much that we did not even go through the advertisement. We installed all the signage ourselves at our cost. So with this study, we really want to do it right. We want to do the reach out. We want to take our time. We want to look at the parking. We don't want to rush things, and we want to make sure we have all the connections and the correct routes. And to that end, and it is in the staff report, I recommended to South Bay COG that they do the RFP, get a consulting firm that would work regionally, not only with City of El Segundo, but with all the other cities. That way, our consulting firm, if we were to select, would not necessarily be the same consulting firm for City of Hawthorne or City of Manhattan Beach, but having one consulting firm, it helps a lot. And South Bay COG took my suggestion, and they are in process of doing an RFP. These numbers you see are just the budget numbers. When it comes to reality, we will work very closely with South Bay COG to make sure that the right fees are implemented with the right consulting firm. Will be part of the selection of this consulting firm to a great degree. And we'll have a lot of say-so about how we want to implement this project.
But I can just chime in here. We do have the flexibility or the ability, I think, to work with the COG to flip those phases like you've shared. And we'll make sure that we do that.
Yes.
When we begin discussions with them as a result of your feedback tonight.
Right.
Yeah, because we can already take golf carts down Maple to Campus El Segundo, and that works. But I don't want to spend consultant money and then get locked in with a regional consultant saying, here's the plan, and the plan pretends that I'm going to compete with an 18-wheeler going down into the Douglas Gap closure, which is just not going to happen.
Yeah. Right. And I have spoken to South Bay COG personnel myself about the route and not really spend too much money on the Vista Del Mar option because of the speed. But we do have to work with the county. We have to work with city of Dallas because part of Grand Avenue is we have to deal with the city of LA. So to that end, I can assure you that all these comments gonna be implemented and the money will be spent wisely. And we're gonna take our time, and we're gonna do our best to make a system which people understands it better. They have more input and more interaction with the community and more outreaching.
Yeah, and as we develop the RFP, we could even share that with the council.
Yes.
Why don't we write a letter to the COG and just from
Sure.
the council to be more explicit about
Sure.
what our intention is?
Yeah,
They will
absolutely.
respond, in my experience,
Yeah.
well to that.
Good idea. We'll do that.
Sure.
Any further council comments?
No objections to delegating to the city manager to enter into the agreement so we can start this process. I
Is that a
think you've
motion?
heard enough comments. I so move approval of Measure M Local Travel Network Funding Agreement.
Pimentel, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0.
Thank you, Elias.
Item 9, over to you, Councilmember Giroux.
All right, the extension of the agreement with the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health for public health services. I think this is probably more of a soapbox moment for me than anything else, but is this the only option that we have? I think we learned historically over the past 5 years that this has been a challenge when you have the LA County Health Department doing this, locking us in again. I mean, I'm trying to figure out what is it what are we buying into when we do this? Other than what we saw during COVID, like what are we buying into?
Yeah, Councilmember DeRue, I think you're exactly right. This was very notable during COVID and pandemic. The only other times that we use it as a fire department is if there is a commercial fire within a kitchen at a restaurant. We need them to come in to authorize reopening of that kitchen. Now, in terms of the global scale, it's really public education. I'll defer to the city attorney, but there's like 33 cities that already contract with them, other than Long Beach and Pasadena, for those, I guess, services, if you call them that. But we do have to abide by their regulations. We do have our own medical director that coordinates with the public health department for any policies, but I'm with you.
I mean, have we seen any signs that over the past 5 years, this has been an improved situation from what it was? Because it was very political at one point in time. Have we seen anything to deter us from believing that that's still to be the case?
We have not seen anything.
But the reality is we have no other option unless we decided to do our own.
Well, I will say that's a true statement, but I'll defer to the city attorney.
We costed out doing our own. And the cost of running a health department that furnishes all the state mandated health services from it is $16 million. Because we looked at it was the beach cities north of Redondo, so us, Hermosa, Manhattan, Inglewood. If we got together and tried to do this, it was going to cost us $16 million was the all-in for it. And it just became unappealing. So that's why the only independent cities that do it have been doing it since they were founded. So Pasadena and Long Beach are the only two that go it alone on this. And even then, if you talk to, Pasadena, well, hey, what's it like? They, I think, would rather have had the county doing it because people just throw rocks at you. I mean, it's not pleasant.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You gonna move approval now, Lance?
No.
I will move approval.
Keldorf on the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
4-1. All right, that gets us through the consent calendar, which was partially consensual. All right, public hearing. This is a time and place here to fix for a public hearing. City clerk, was proper notice of the hearing given in a timely manner?
Proper notice was given in a timely manner.
Excellent. We will have item 11, which is a public hearing for approval of the proposed fiscal year 25-26 city operating budget, capital improvement program budget, GAN appropriations limit, and associated financial policies. City Manager, who will present on this item?
Yes, our Chief Financial Officer, Paul Chung, will present the item, but I just will kick it off by just saying once again that I want to thank certainly the council for all its input during, I think, our May 5th budget workshop, lengthy budget workshop, where we pretty much went through the entire, every department and every line item for the most part. I want to certainly thank Paul and his staff and all the department heads. This budget has been in the works now for probably since, February, even January. So as you know, a lot goes into this. We are proud to be presenting a balanced budget this evening. Paul will be presenting kind of a condensed version of what you saw back on May 5th with the incorporations of the decisions that were made during that budget workshop. And any other changes or modifications you'd like to make tonight, we'll certainly incorporate those if necessary. So I'll turn it over to Paul.
And before you begin, has there been any written public comment?
We're on the same page. There has not. Thank you for asking.
And are the lights of the appropriate hue?
Well, we're
My
working
script
on
says
that.
to change the lights.
You said you weren't going to say anything.
I read everything you put
Okay.
down.
Both lights out or one light out? This is good? We can see, no glare? All right. You may proceed.
All right. Well, thank you, City Council, and thank you, City Manager, for the introduction. And even before I begin, I do want to turn over to my staff. I have Vicky over here, I got Dino, and some of the other staff that's not here tonight that's been involved in this budget process since the beginning of January. So I wanted to commend their efforts. We not only had the budget, but we're also implementing an ERP system, which takes 3 or sometimes 8 to 9 hours in our day. So it's been really busy with finance, but they've really been digging deep and getting the budget together. So I really want to appreciate their works and acknowledge their efforts on packaging the budget together. I also want to acknowledge the executive team. Without them and their analysts, we weren't able to package the budget together. So I really want to thank their efforts. And of course, I turn it over to City Manager for his efforts and his leadership through the budget process. And lastly, of course, Council and meeting with us and going through the process, because this document is important for the community. With that said, tonight's presentation is a public hearing and an adoption of the proposed fiscal year 2025-26 annual operating and CIP budget. In regards to timeline, as I mentioned, we start this process in January, and back a month ago, May 5th, we had our budget study session where Council directed staff on certain items to be revised in the budget. So I'll be presenting that tonight in regards to what changed from our May 5th meeting, and then we will adopt the budget. In regards to presentation, it is a condensed version of our May 5th study session. I will highlight what changed from our budget study session. I will go into some of the overview of our revenues, expenditures, fund balance, and our 5-year forecast, and lastly, our CIP for next year. And before I begin on our numbers, I do wanted to highlight for the council that back in February, we did receive from the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers, or CSMFO, for our budget book that they reviewed. This process, we've applied for this review annually, and we received our Meritorious Award from CSMFO, and we've been getting this award annually, but Meritorious Award is really just kind of, I look at it as AYSO, and you have a participation medal for just participating. If you apply, they tend to give you that award, but the most important thing is the feedback you receive from the various reviewers. What works for your budget? What's great? What can you beef up? What can you do better so that you could provide additional data for the community and the readers for the budget? So we incorporated that feedback, and this year, which is part of your attachment of the staff report, the staff and I, and specifically Liz, our management analyst, and Liana, our admin tech specialist, the three of us really worked on really kind of beefing up our budget. And you'll see that as an attachment. We've included some of the council pictures as well. But beyond that, we really worked on department narratives and org chart, updated the El Segundo demographics, the history. We also included a page for GAN appropriations limit. We also included CPIs, and also just a comparison for other cities as well. And that's all included in the new updated budget book. And hopefully this, in February, February of 2026, CSMFO will potentially give us the Excellence Award in lieu of the Meritorious Award. Going into our budget, El Segundo, regards to our strength, it's really our diverse revenue stream that we have. We are unique in that sense that we can shelter some of the economic downturns, being that our revenues are diverse. Our location overall, being that we're between LAX and the ocean, helps us being unique in that sense. We will maintain our AAA bond rating. We continue to have low debt, meaning we only have 2 debts on our books. Our pension obligation bond, or our POB, is locked in at 2.7%. That saves us millions of dollars on our budget. Our general fund reserve will remain at 25%. And lastly, our reserves will remain strong. And I have a slide later in the slide deck regards to what our reserves look like. Going into fiscal year 25-26, these are some of the highlights that impacted our budget. Revenues will remain flat going into next year. I took a very conservative look at our revenues, being that there's so many moving parts going into next fiscal year. We also added additional police officers, which I'll go into more detail on in the subsequent slides. We also added $2.9 million of the unfunded accrued liability. These are our pension costs that were from CalPERS that was required for us to pay next year. POA MOUs are in current negotiations. That is not included in next year's budget. When the negotiations are complete and the MOUs are complete, I will come back to council regards to any kind of budget changes that are required for that completion of the MOU. Regards to the plunge, the construction is anticipated to end in December, and we've also included 6 months of operations, which begins January 2026 into June of 2026. We also included $5.2 million of general fund CIPs. We also updated our public safety overtime budget, which we discussed in length in our budget study session. We also included a 5% vacancy rate to our budget. And lastly, I do see a potential structural deficit coming in fiscal year 27-28, which I will cover in our 5-year forecast in our coming slides. Going into the numbers, council. So from our last budget study session, there were 2 things that changed from what was proposed back in May 5th. The first line at the top is our PD. So at the time when we proposed the budget, we had added 69 officers to the sworn officers to the budget, but council's direction was to go ahead and reduce that to 67. So the budgetary difference was that salaries and benefits decreased by $314,000. We lowered the M&O, or maintenance and operations, by $10,000, and also the FT was decreased by 2. Also, one of the council meetings, RPL presented to a new program for Club Cowabunga. That's the after-school program. That cost is now included in the budget. And that for the salary and benefits, that was $80,000. The M&O for some of the supplies was $15,000 to kickstart the program. And the FT increase was 1.6. So those are basically hourly employees that they needed to run the program. And lastly, this is a revenue offset program, so $90,000 was added to the budget as well. So in total, we've decreased our budget by $235,330 in the salaries and benefits. M&O slightly increased by $5,000. FTE a decrease of 0.4, and then revenues were increased by $90,000, which is reflected in your proposed budget tonight.
Hey, Paul, quick question on the last slide. Are you saying after we incur the cost for the salaries and the maintenance operation, we're going to be plus 90, or is it going to be wash?
Yes.
Plus 90. Okay, thank you.
Ellie, it should be a net, right?
Net.
Net.
Okay.
So it'll be maybe $8,000, but it'll be a positive program. But it won't be that we're bringing in additional $90,000 on top.
Gotcha.
Just wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
Paul, before we get too far,
Yes.
do you know how much our unfunded liability has been the last, say, decade? There's a reason I bring it up, which is One thing I don't think most of us know is that when the discount rate is set, which is the target for the investments for CalPERS, for all their different investments, right now it's at
6.8.
6.8. They talked about going to 6.5 back when your predecessor, Joe Lilio, and I were in Sacramento making an appeal to their board. That was 6 years ago, so they lowered it a little bit. The problem when they set the number too high, and they've historically missed it, there have been years that they've hit it, but if you look back, they've cost cities a lot of money, different agencies, by missing the discount rate, underperforming it, is that not only taxpayers, but also employees pay for the upfront burden of the pension costs.
Yes, they do.
But when we miss, only the taxpayers pay. So all these there's $2.9 million, that is a burden to the city that is not shared by the employees as well. So I just want to point out that it's an inherent flaw with the CalPERS system and a lower discount rate than we're actually achieving on a historical basis, and one that continues to cost our city's money, this city money, year over year. So there's nothing we can do about it other than continue to make a case, because they did lower it once. They also tie the hands of the people at CalPERS in terms of what they can invest in. They legislate different things, like you can't invest in guns, you can't invest in tobacco companies, you can't invest in petroleum companies, I think, even in some cases. So it's a system that's got some inherent flaws. So just want to take a moment to point that out.
And pension costs, CalPERS in general, for me as an employee too, it's a double-edged sword, meaning there's a benefit on the employee side, but of course on the employer side, there's a huge financial burden that is carried upon not only on El Segundo, but just any agency that partakes in CalPERS. And that 6.8 discount rate has been discussed probably for 20 years, that it's just been too high. It used to be at 7.2%, and they lowered it.
I think Councilmember Boyle's point is, though, the employer is not some nebulous Fortune 500 company. The employer is all the people sitting in this room. We're the ones who have to take the proverbial haircut, which is a bad term in my case. Continue, please.
Okay. Regards to our just breakdown of our full-time versus part-time, full-time for next year will be at 298 employees at full-time, and our part-time will be at 80.31, bringing us our total to 378.31 FTEs or full-time equivalent positions. Drilling a little deeper into the numbers, for our proposed revenues for all funds next year will be $185,171,641. And the orange pie is the general fund portion. That's going to be $104.6 million. And all non-general funds will be at $80.6 million. This table here just breaks down all the various funds for our revenues. Of course, general fund being the top line here. I won't go through each and every of the line items, but unless council has specific questions, I would say the more detailed item here on the next slide is just focusing on the general fund. As I mentioned, we are keeping our revenues next year flat, being that it's just a very conservative outlook going into next year, just with the various economic signs of slowdown. We don't see much growth. So I wanted to take a conservative look into next year. I do wanted to highlight on line 7, charges for service. That line item now includes that Club Calabunga 90,000. So I wanted to highlight that the only change that has been made since when we met back in our May 5th was that line item, bringing our total to $104,573,049 for general fund next year's budget. Regards to appropriations, our total funds appropriation next year is $218,850,160. The orange line is the general fund, $104.7 million, and then the blue pie is anything non-general fund, and that's $114.2 million for next year. This table here just breaks down all the various appropriations or expenditures going into next year. Of course, general fund being the biggest portion of the expenditure. And as I mentioned, the total expenditures for next year is $218.9 million. Just focusing on the general fund appropriations by department. The top two are police and fire, is comprise of over 50% of our general fund budget. The biggest change for police, the 12%, is really driven by the 5 additional police officers that were added to next year's budget. On the fire department, the reason for the increase of 16.4%, main driver for that is the dispatch cost, which used to reside all in police, has now been split 50-50. So 50% sits with police and 50% sits with fire, and the total cost of dispatch is $1.2 million. Just going down the line here on line 5, non-departmental, an increase of 11%. That's really driven by our insurance costs for liability, general liability, and also our workers' comp. And hovering back down to line 9 of city manager's office, a 12% increase. That's really just driven by unfreezing of a position from this year. Next year, the position for senior management analyst was unfrozen and included in the budget. And the remaining line items are small changes. Some departments saw a slight decrease. Okay. And just to summarize the general fund revenues, as I mentioned, it's $104.6 million. The expenditures are $104.7 million. That's really comprised of $99.4 million for the departmental general fund expenditures, and then the $5.2 million is the general fund CIP. Just getting a little more granular here, Council, regards to our general fund appropriations for next year. So if we look at the top line, just salaries alone for next year is proposed to be $41.9 million. Retirements and benefits is $21.2 million. And it's really not the benefits that's driving this big cost, but it's actually the retirement portion of it, and that's that UAL payment of $2.9 million that's included in there. And that's really what that big portion of it is, the increase for next year, not benefits going up. Also, maintenance operations, the M&O, is $26.4 million. So total, $89.5 million for general fund appropriations, not including capital outlay and transfers out. And then regards to our transfers out, it's $15.1 million, and that comprises of 4 items. The debt service, or our POB payment, of the annual payment to our debt service is $9.5 million. The general fund CIP is proposed at $5.2 million. Solid waste fund, $211,000, and lastly, the senior housing fund for $200,000. This table here, Council, is just to kind of give you an idea of what our unassigned fund balance, in a way, our reserve will look like at the end of next fiscal year. So in order to get to that number, we start with what I estimate for our unassigned fund balance to begin our July 1st of 2025. So we're anticipating at $33.1 million. And our revenues, as I mentioned, next year is at $104.6 million. Our expenditures, net out the CIP, is $99.4 million. So then our estimated fund balance will be $38.2 million. Then we want, per our fiscal policy, we want to keep 25%. That's $24.9 million that was set aside. So the remaining anticipated unassigned fund balance would be $13.3 million. And of that 13.3, we are contributing $5.2 million for our general fund CIP. And that brings me to our 5-year forecast. So not much has changed since the May 5th study session, but I just wanted to highlight for the council, the blue line is our revenue, orange being the expenditure. And as you can see, the next 2 fiscal years, I anticipate us to be balanced. But then looking into 27-28, if there's no new revenue sources, and my forecast includes a 4% revenue growth for the next 5 years, but expenditures at a 7% growth. And I took a historic look back about 10 years, and that's kind of where we've been at. So I kind of used that as a projector to look into the future. And ultimately, 27-28 is kind of where I see a structural deficit, meaning our operating revenues won't cover our operating costs. And the gray line there is just our fund balance. And as we will dip into our fund balance, being that we'll be in some form of a structural deficit in 27-28 and ongoing, we do anticipate our fund balance to be at a negative in 29-30. With that said, there are options that council has regards to potentially revenue options that the council can maybe pull a lever on. Sales tax measure C. Currently, our sales tax is at 9.75, one of the lowest in South Bay or even LA in general. And the 0.75 increase will bring in additional $9 million a year. Our TOT is currently at 12%. Is one of the lowest in South Bay as well. Most cities are at 13 or 14% TOT rate. A 1% increase will bring in additional $1 million approximately. Also, our utility users tax is also one of the lowest around South Bay at 3%. Most are at 4 or 5%. And if we were to increase that by 1%, depending upon which utility we were to increase that, we're looking at $500,000 to about $1 million annually. That will bring in additional revenue. And lastly, the Chevron TRA agreement is due to expire on September 2027. So that might potentially bring in additional revenue as well. Regards to our overall reserves, our general fund reserve at the end of next year, keeping at 25%, will be $24.9 million. Our economic uncertainty reserves remains at $2 million. Our OPEB reserves at $36.7 million, pension trust reserve at $6.3 million, and our general fund CIP reserve at $400,000. So last few slides here for you, council. Regards to our CIP projects for all funds. So our carryover projects, basically any projects that we're not finishing this year, that's carrying over to next fiscal year. That's $14.3 million of CIP that will carry into next year. Regards to new CIPs, that's $14.5 million. That comprises of $2.1 million in the transportation funds, which is the road work, road pavement. The $5.8 million is from our enterprise fund, our water fund, and our wastewater fund for our pipes. $500,000 from special revenue funds, $800,000 from our stormwater fund, and lastly, $5.2 million for our general fund. So the total CIP for next year, you're looking at $28.7 million or $28.8 million. Regards to the general fund CIP, I know we went to discussion in length in our budget study session, but nothing has changed. These are the projects that were presented to you back on May 5th, and that's the $5.2 million worth of general fund CIP that's listed here. Lastly, council, the staff's recommendation is to adopt resolution approving the proposed fiscal year 2025-26 citywide operating budget, capital improvement program budget, various financial policies, and the GAN appropriations limit. With that said, staff is available for any questions. Thank you.
The public hearing is now open for public input. Seeing none, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Baldino on the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0, council discussion.
We talk about the budget for more than just this meeting, just so everybody knows. Like, we work on these numbers, we review them. The last study sessions, we're really trying to move things around. So this is kind of like what we've asked the city to do. So don't be shocked if we're sitting up here saying, okay, you've done what we've asked you to do. Thank you, Paul, for your diligence. Thank your staff for everything you've done. This is a huge task, and I appreciate the effort.
Thank you.
Couple quick questions. I noted that we're paying that $2.9 million, or we paid it, and we paid it out of the general fund and not out of our pension trust. Given that the performance, our UAL is a year lagging, right? And so there's always, sometimes we have a great year, sometimes we have a bad year, and we run the risk, which we're typically concerned of on our end, maybe not so much you, of being super funded, right, and having stranded assets, because once you've committed somebody to the pension pool, you can't pull it back. So given that our pension trust is restricted in what we can use those dollars for, pension-related activities, what is the wisdom of using general fund dollars to pay the 2.9 million instead of pension trust money? Is it just that we're capturing a superior interest rate in the pension trust fund than we would in LAIF?
Absolutely, and I do wanted to emphasize that they're actually 2 years behind. So CalPERS, when they close their books June 30th this year, we won't see that impact for another 2 years. So they're always lagging back 2 years. But going back to your point, Mayor, yes, it's really driven by the pension fund that we have separate has been earning quite a bit better than what CalPERS would bring at 6.8%. Even the CalPERS CEO about a month and a half ago kind of forewarned or foreshadowed that things are not looking really good on the investment side on their side, and they're kind of telling all agencies to kind of brace for a big UAL payment, probably recalculating for the next 2 years into the future. So with that said, I feel that it's prudent for us to keep our pension fund separate, so that being that it earned, I think when we met, it was close to 9–10%. Even there were times when we were earning 14%. So I would say that's better to keep it there, that it earns just more interest.
Very well. And with that in mind, also I noted that we kind of celebrated the last 2 years of our superior gains in just interest earnings on our investments. We forecast a $5.8 million improvement this year, which is, and last year, we sort of jumped up and down. We got $5 million. Are we confident in this environment that we'll be able to achieve that with our conservative governance of our investment portfolio?
Yes, and Dino and I, we actually go through it in detail. And being that we are locked in, most of our investments are locked in at 4.5 to 5%. We feel that for the next at least 2 years, 3 years, that we reap that benefit. Now, of course, if the Feds start decreasing the rates, then we would have to kind of reconfigure our portfolio. But for now, the city treasurer that I know stepped down in January has done a fantastic job locking us in 3 years, 5 years, and we are going to see that benefit at least for the next 2 years.
So I set that up for you?
Yes.
Which is a frame of reference, right? We pay $9 million a year on our pension obligation bond, but we make $6 million back just on interest. That's a nice get.
Yes.
I would also point out, just to celebrate Mayor Boyle's point, before Mayor Boyle's point one more time, that UAL payment comes down to $171 per resident of El Segundo this year. They had to shell out for unfunded liability. So that's almost a water bill.
Now, if the council didn't issue a POB bond and locked in at 2.7, we're probably looking at additional $2 million on top of that 2.9, so close to $5 million. So it was great that the council had issued those bonds a couple of years ago.
We already hired you. You don't have to.
I can't take credit. It happened pre me, so I'm not trying to take.
We know.
Yes.
With that, anything further from the council on this? Because we can take all items on one motion. Oh, I had one last question. We had talked briefly at the last study session about collapsing the Economic Uncertainty Fund into the general fund, because that was established at a time when we were only setting aside 13, 14, 15% as a reserve. Now that we're at 25% reserve, we're almost double saving. I don't know if there's anyone who has any interest in that. I attended a county meeting where the county is in dire straits, and I can foresee there being services for which we've become accustomed that they will no longer be providing to our satisfaction, that we may have to fund. So even though I think we are over-saving by having a 25% reserve and $2 million for economic uncertainty, I would like to backtrack on that and say that keep it the way it is, but with a big pin in it when we do this next year, I don't think we should be. I think we have a redundant savings plan. Does that make sense to anyone?
Mm-hmm. Keep it the same. Talk about it again next year.
Kick it on down the road.
Brilliant.
All right, I will, oh, we have to adopt a resolution. Over to you, City Attorney.
Mayor and Council, a resolution adopting the 2025-2026 final operating and capital improvement budget and 2025-2026 appropriation limit for the City of El Segundo is ready for adoption.
I will move adoption.
I'll second it.
It's Drew on the second, Pimentel on the first. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0, it passes. Thank you very much.
Council. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager and staff, for that.
Thank you.
All right, item 12, staff presentation, the Command Vehicle Technology Purchase and Competitive Bidding Waiver. City Manager, I believe Chief Avery and Chief Sefke will be back up here.
Yes, you've got it, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. We're here today to request a technology increase for our command vehicle. When we respond to an emergency incident in our command vehicle, we have to use old technology that is cumbersome and challenging. It's the same technology I used when I was a battalion chief 15 years ago, and we still have it today. Effective resource tracking and seeing the big picture is really critical for our operation, and so we are asking for an upgrade for the technology for our battalion chief vehicle. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Chief Sifke to present. I didn't mean to age myself, but I had to.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. I appreciate your time. Just to start this off, question, is why do we need this? There's a lot of different reasons. One is that, when we make those decisions out in the field on any type of incident, we run on all different types of incidents, is just improving our situational awareness and the tools that we utilize to get the most up-to-date and comprehensive information in order to make those decisions when we start deploying resources, whether it be an active shooter, whether it be, structure fires or the like. We've been working a lot closer with PD as far as their drone program, and I've been in many discussions with Lieutenant McEnroe and his team about how the fire department could join in and be a little bit more efficient with how we can utilize their drones on a fire scene. And so the plan moving forward is to develop policies and procedures with them and have something in place where it's much more efficient. So you can stream live drone footage to the command post, which can also be a live web link into the executive conference room, the EOC, once we get that up and the new EOC up and running. So some of the software that we already have is is First Do. It has a response module where you can actually have an overview of a map that actually shows the vehicles moving across the map and who's going to arrive on scene first. So with that, we don't have the ability to transmit that onto a TV where you can see it in large scale. And then we are moving towards looking at tablet command, which is also a digital way of tracking resources. Right now, it's literally a grease pencil or a dry erase marker. And so this would be a digital platform to track resources for the incident. So it does address a couple of the strategic goals and council priorities as far as technology goes. This is the current vehicle we have. It's a 2018 Chevrolet Suburban, relatively low miles. When this vehicle was built by a company called BME in Idaho, it was their first vehicle that they ever built as far as a command vehicle. They're known for their Type 3 engines. The technology, quite frankly, that was built into it is substandard even for 2018. So we are looking to add a couple different radios to this vehicle we want to upfit, television displays, and then we don't have a reserve command vehicle. So if this vehicle leaves on a strike team, like the Palisades, we don't have a command vehicle adequate enough to run an incident in the city. Or if it goes in for service. If it goes in for normal maintenance or repairs, we don't have a vehicle to move back to that's adequate. So as I said, antiquated technology. One of the issues is because it's an enclosed vehicle, our turnout gear, if I were to go on a structure fire and I take my gear off and I put it in the rig, I'm driving around with carcinogens inside the vehicle, whereas the vehicle we're looking to upfit, which we already own, is basically a pickup truck, and all the gear gets stored in the bed of the truck, so it's not in the same passenger space as the battalion chief. So this is the vehicle. It's a 2019 Ford F-250. This was purchased by Chevron from the consent decree, so it's already purchased. It was upfitted by a company called 911 Vehicle in Anaheim, and they built exactly how you see it. They took the raw truck, built out an initial technology package with lighting and a few different radios, but as you can see, it just has a bed extender in the back, and the only appropriation we have for running an incident is a dry erase board on the tailgate. So if we were to have to move to this, that's the technology that we're dealing with as far as a command vehicle. So here's some examples. This is the Burbank spec. These are all the basic exact design of the spec that we're proposing. It has a couple touch screen displays. It adds two more radios, and they have they basically have the technology that we're looking to do. We can connect the drones directly to the command post, and you can have drone footage on one TV, and you can have tablet command or first due on the other TV, or you can pull up local news channels. It has Apple TV, so you can stream something from an iPad to the screen, you know, documents for hazardous materials and things like that. So benefits of drones on fires. With infrared cameras, you can see where the fire is. So if I had that view at the command post, it really helps us identify where the location of the fire is just by the heat signatures, so we can deploy our resources appropriately. So it was just, we had done a couple demos with Chevron Fire Department's command vehicle. They came over and kind of transmitted, so the picture on, this is one of PD's drones on the left, and then the image on the right is kind of a viewpoint. So if I was the incident commander, I can see an aerial view, and then with PD being there operating the drones, we can give them direction of where to fly it so we can get other views. As an incident commander, you're kind of limited as far as what you can actually see. It's a brief little video, which everybody knows what a drone does. So some comparable purchases. The oldest comparable purchase was from Manhattan Beach's command vehicle in 2017, was $107,000. So you see a wide variety of prices, but it's important to know the asterisk is that that is just the upfitting cost that they paid to upfit the vehicle. So with the vehicle being approximately $90,000 to $100,000 for a pickup truck, a 3/4 or 1 ton truck, plus tax and all that stuff, you're in the neighborhood of $300,000. So the cost, the total is $132,195 from 911 vehicle. That includes parts, labor, and tax. It's about a 50-50 cost of parts and labor. And so we are looking to use, currently we have unrestricted development impact fees of $204,000. So we're looking to use a portion of that towards this upfitting. And then 911 vehicles, the vendor that we utilize for the initial build in 2019 to build it how you see it. And they are part of the Sourcewell contract already. That's why we went with them. So it was a lot easier as far as the purchase goes. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm available.
Questions? Council comments?
I got a couple. One of the things in the staff report was that that your the department is serving the city's best interest and is requesting a direct award of a contract without a competitive selection process. So I was just wondering what the explanation is behind that. That's something that's kind of come up on the dais a few times about that. So.
Yeah, so like I said, the original build was done by 911 Vehicle in Anaheim. There's not a lot of companies in California or local that do what 911 Vehicle does, and so there's a lot of agencies that utilize 911 Vehicle for their build process. The other vendors that I looked at are on the East Coast that do something similar, but not quite what they do. West Coast seems to build their command vehicles, even fire apparatus for that matter, very different than the East Coast. And so we're talking Florida, New York, New Jersey, Wisconsin. There's a lot of companies. So we would have to ship the vehicle to those locations, and then any warranty work, we'd have to ship the vehicle back for the warranty. The other issue that we have is that if we were to send it to another vendor, is that if the 911 Vehicle has built vehicles for agencies, and then they subsequently sent the vehicle to another agency to have more technology built into it, and their work fried the other work that they had already done, and they have said we won't warranty anymore if someone else works on this vehicle, because we've done it too many times and we've lost money. So they're not interested in honoring that warranty.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Other questions? One, I think that one of the points of emphasis we've had for public safety is utilizing technology, so I'm glad we're looking at these things. My concern is that this particular array of capabilities is evolving very, very quickly. And we've bought the right now technology through the police department, but the command and control systems for drones and the miniaturization of radios and the ability to use internet capable radios is all happening very, very quickly. And by the time we field this system, it will be a generation obsolete. I'll give you a stat that's one of those strange ones, that there is a chance, if the current production rate continues at one of our companies in El Segundo, more drones will be built in El Segundo this year than will have been built in the entire history of the United States. That's how quick this is evolving. And they're controlled by phones. They're controlled from 100 kilometers away by phones, as opposed to architecting a vehicle with giant amplifiers and monitors and command and control. I would submit that there is a chance, if we had an open competition to a company in town and just said, kit out a truck with monitors, ruggedized radios, ruggedized tablets, and drone control, they could probably do it for $10,000. My concern is not about the capability. This is not about, I think this is a worthwhile pursuit and application in terms of total capability, but in the same year that we're spending $1.9 million on a new fire truck, and the year after we bought 5 new motorcycles with a combined grand total of 50,000 miles on them, pouring money, $100,000 into a capability that we will be generationally behind by the time that we replace this vehicle, which is a 2019 truck, so they'll be asking us to replace it next year or in 2 years. I just can't, I just don't know that that's the right use of it. If currently, virtually any scenario that the fire department's responding to in town, the police will be there. And we dial 911, that drone's already gonna be in the air. And it's just a matter of transferring information from that unmanned system between departments, which will be on scene together. I just don't know that spending $130,000 on this capability is, it is a good tool. It is a good tool. I don't know if it's the best value for those dollars. I would rather see it put to the $1.9 million fire truck.
But to your point, Christo, as far as technology and the evolution of it, no matter what point in the purchasing process you're going to take down the road, you're going to be in the same situation because it's constantly evolving.
Yeah, but that F-150 or F-350, whatever it is, the F-350 from 5 years ago and an F-350 bought now are kind of the same F-350. The seats heat the same. Whereas a drone you purchase now versus the drone command and control system that we can do next year are going to be light years different. And for $130,000, I mean, that is, you could buy a stack of tablets and a stack of drones and a stack of radios and just drive around in the back of that pickup truck. Like, I think that we're buying technology at the government rate and not technology at the real rate.
Do we have the ability to buy it at the real rate?
If a company would paint it red, it would.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the same 3 companies that sell us all this stuff at these exorbitant rates, right? So if you went into Radio Shack and painted it red and called it Radio Shack for fire departments, you could triple the price.
Let me ask, once the truck is outfitted, how many years of service do you project to get from it?
I mean, I think it would go at least 10 years. I mean, we're, 10 years at least. And one of the other things is that when that vehicle was purchased, we have kind of an issue with as far as funding in the equipment replacement for the vehicles. Part of the problem with that vehicle is, even along with Engine 32, was from the consent decree was never added to the equipment replacement fund.
Well, I will say, with Engine 32, the council declined to spend $900,000 to replace the previous engine that year because it was running fine. And there was a little bit of a back and forth about, do we just replace things on a calendar or do we replace them on mileage? And so the council kicked it down the road for 2 years, and then the city of Richmond sued Chevron, and Chevron said, okay, well, we'll agree to buy a fire truck and we'll just give it to El Segundo. Thank you. I mean, that was awesome. It was awesome. But that was a free fire truck.
You said that the current Suburban's got, what, 22.5 on it? Mileage? That was, that was said, I said 22,500. It's a Suburban. That thing can run forever and a day. So I'm just saying that if we go ahead and approve this and we're spending this money, that you're not coming back in 3 years and saying we need a new Suburban.
No, absolutely not. Like I said, it does solve our issue. So in other words, with the upfitting of the pickup truck, that becomes our primary frontline command vehicle that stays in the city. And then if a strike team were to occur, or if their vehicle goes out of service, that Suburban is what goes. So that primary vehicle stays here. And so it does solve our issue of not having an adequate command vehicle in reserve. We recognize that it's a lot to maintain reserve apparatus, but that's how we maintain our service, because if something goes out of service and breaks, or we just have engine 33 out right now. And so the idea is that we have something to move up in its place so we can maintain service, whether it be a strike team deployment or for normal preventative maintenance, that sort of thing. So we'll get quite a bit of use out of both of these vehicles for a long period of time. So I'm confident that with the mileage on it, that these will be adequate vehicles for a long period of time.
Most of this cost, though, is integrating the system into the vehicle. If you just threw man-portable systems in the back of that, I mean, $100,000 buys a lot of radios and a lot of batteries and a lot of monitors. I mean,
That's what I'm struggling with, is I think you said roughly 50% of the 130 is labor.
Correct.
So at 100 an hour, that's like 600 hours of labor to outfit a vehicle. That just seems to me absolutely.
And that's what I think we're seeing kind of industry-wide with our fire apparatus and things like that. I just got an updated cost on an engine, and it went up from February of last year to yesterday. The price of an engine went up $82,000. And they're doing a 1.5% increase every 3 months. And so there's been a lot of articles lately about, diminishing fire apparatus manufacturers and how they're kind of consolidating, and IAFF is actually looking into kind of this driving of cost, and they're kind of want an investigation into this. So it's just, unfortunately, everything is very expensive, and it takes a lot of time and effort in the way they wire. If you saw this vehicle, that just the way it sits, everything is very neatly, it's very nicely done.
But we're buying it from someone who just does fire apparatus. If we went to just any sort of aftermarket place and said, hey, I need a truck, and I need my truck to be able to control drones and have radios hooked in and a monitor, I know it wouldn't cost $130,000, right? This is an inward-looking industry, and this is not fire-specific equipment. I mean, it's one thing to have a ladder truck. Nobody else is going to build a ladder truck. Volkswagen's not going to build me a ladder truck. A lot of people give you command and control systems for a drone. I mean, you can blow up half the Russian Air Force for $50,000.
Right. I think from our perspective, it's more than just being able to operate drones or work with PD to enhance our capability with drones. It's really being able to pull up maps that are large scale at the command post and be able to interact with those maps. Our pre-fire plans all show up in that First Due app, so we can pull up, hazardous material locations and how, as we start to build out our fire prevention and pre-fire planning, all that information is available to us on those screens.
Yeah, it's a tablet with a large ruggedized monitor. I mean, I see that. I'm not going to belabor. I've said my piece.
No, I envision in 2 years, 3 years from now, Chief, you're gonna be back here and say the monitors are no longer relevant. We need to upgrade the monitors and half the other equipment in there. And when half the cost is labor, we're gonna be right back at this. I tend to agree with the mayor that I think the more that we can do with portable equipment, I know why you want this, but I was gonna ask you, if you had $130,000, what would be the best thing you could do for fire prevention and also, fire response? Would it be this, or is it because we already have this vehicle from Chevron?
Well, I mean, that's definitely having the vehicle already is a benefit. being that it has low miles and things like that, we feel that it is the best use of the development impact fees for this purpose. As the city continues to grow and build out, we need to kind of keep up with the technology, and even our current vehicle that we have is substandard as far as communications equipment and the technology built into the Suburban that we have. So this is an opportunity to move that vehicle into frontline status with with the upfitting, and then moving the other Suburban back into reserve status. And we would no longer be funding the Suburban. Those funds move over, and we're actually super funded in the equipment replacement for this vehicle of about $170,000 of funds that already exist. Whereas the pickup truck doesn't have any funding in it right now. I think it might have $17,000 just because it was never added. And so it does address a few issues. We're gonna have about $170,000 super funded into the pickup truck when this gets moved into reserve status. So as far as utilizing those development impact fees, we feel like this right now, because we have funds that I've been strategizing over the last couple of years as far as a game plan to replace engines, to replace rescues, and I've identified equipment replacement funds to do that. So this is just the development impact fees to do this project. And there's gonna be a balance of about $71,000 that could be moved over into another item, like the engine or something like that, that is underfunded.
Just one more thing. Chief Rodriguez, I'm going to ask you for your opinion on this. And the reason being is the first time in 5 years I've seen police and fire up here on one project. And it's the first I've heard like an actual technology where you're actually working together. So how does this help or assist your department in your duties?
Kind of how was already mentioned, for large-scale events, when we are in unified command, there's definitely a benefit for that. The live stream of the drone, we can do that right now currently with our command system, but it does offer, should we have a large-scale event where fire is doing their thing and we're doing our thing, because many times our kind of responsibilities are different, but yet we are working together, and their ability to see what we're doing, vice versa, is great. So it'll definitely benefit us in that capacity. But on the day-to-day operation, I really can't say necessarily, but for a large-scale event, definitely will be beneficial for them to do that.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
This feels to me like technology 20 years ago where you had two different systems and they couldn't talk. Like that, which is just not the way systems work anymore. Like you don't need a specific piece of equipment to pass that information. I mean, these things are all based on the same sort of open architecture.
No, I get it. I completely understand what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing, but I'm saying is that what are the options for being able to outfit this? Like, it seems that we have one that's in the state of California to be able to do it. So I'm saying, the things that you're saying, is there an option to go buy things off market, have somebody put them together, and then put them in the truck? I don't believe so. If it was, that'd be great, but I don't think that's an option here. And that's what
I think it might be.
Say.
I think there's probably a very small set of vendors that call on fire stations and say, would you like our fire equipment? It's painted red.
It's a good business model then.
It's a great business model. Believe me, we're up here writing checks all the time for it.
I am not surprised anymore about the increased cost of government goods. When you're dealing with specialty items like fire or police equipment, they are more expensive than you and I would expect to go buy at the store. I also know enough about how little I know about the needs of first responders. And if you guys are confident that this leap in technology is what you want and is best suited, then you're going to have my support. And when you say it's going to last 10 years, great. I hope technology changes in the next 5 years and things get dramatically cheaper, but unless someone can point to something today that's going to satisfy the need that this is trying to fix, and the options are we can do it locally for the development funds we already have on hand, or we can try to ship it across the country and then deal with warranty issues and everything else. This seems like the most pragmatic way.
I will challenge you. You can go during college football season to a tailgate at the Rose Bowl, and everything that vehicle does, there's 3 hillbillies doing to watch a Georgia game.
While that may be true, it doesn't help us get to the point of how do we provide what our police and fire need right now so they can do their job. If they're telling us this is what we need and we've looked at it and these are our options, and this is our best option, okay, great, thank you. I get all of the hypotheticals, and it's fun to talk about, but in the government world, we are very much constrained when it comes to what we can purchase, it comes to how we can use our funds. And again, this is not anything out of the general fund. These are our development fees that were incurred by developers to be paid for increases in expenses for the fire department. And these funds are being used correctly. Are they expensive? Yes, but so is everything else that we do and approve up here, because that's kind of the nature of the beast. So while I appreciate the pontification of what could be, I think we should focus on what we are working with and what decisions are before us. And for that, you know, if you're telling me this is what you need and you've got a truck to do it and you want to outfit it and it's going to help, then all right. Thank you. So unless there's anything further, I'm going to make a motion.
This is going to be, I move for the same old, same old.
Well, no, I'm going to move to, where are we at, Mr. Mayor?
You're on item D. You would be moving to waive purchasing procedures and authorize the city manager designee.
Waive purchasing procedures for the $132,195,000 purchase of advanced command vehicle technology for an existing vehicle obtained from Chevron in 2019 pursuant to El Segundo Municipal Code Section 1-7-9 Sub A. The fire department is serving the city's best interest and is requesting a direct award contract without competitive bidding process. I also move to authorize the city manager designee to execute the agreement.
Does the Mayor Pro Tem have a second?
Second.
Second from Giroux. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
3-2, the motion passes with Boyles Pimentel voting 9.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, cue the lights back on. Get rid of the lorem again. Item 13, a resolution establishing a live-work preference policy for new city-assisted affordable housing projects within the city of El Segundo. Director Allen, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Before you tonight is a resolution proposing to establish a live-work policy for affordable housing projects that are co-sponsored or assisted by the city through financial means or any other in-kind contributions. Just to give a little background for our viewership to help you understand how we got here today with this policy. This policy is subject to or emanated from the adoption of our housing element, actually 2 housing element cycles ago, but most recently in our current housing element cycle that was adopted in early 2022. One of the programs that was proposed and vetted through HCD, the Community Development, Housing and Community Development branch of the state, was the development of a local housing policy for affordable housing projects. So in 2023, late in 2023, after several study sessions with the Planning Commission and being presented before City Council, staff brought forward a affordable housing strategic plan for adoption. That plan outlined 10 different items, programs to be implemented over the lifespan of the following 8 years to coincide with the housing element cycle. One of the programs in the affordable housing strategic plan was to identify or develop this policy. And so through the study sessions, again, with Planning Commission, we developed that policy in the last year. We've onboarded a on-call service with affordable housing specialist, RSG, who's here with me tonight, who'll give you a little bit of a presentation, walk us through that study session with the Planning Commission, and walk us through the policy that we're proposing tonight. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to RSG. Thank you, Jillian. And then we'll be here for any questions. Or Jim, or both.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Jim Simon with RSG. We're a consultant that's been working with the city for about the last 11 months on this activity. The purpose of the policy, as was stated, is to address the city's concern about, how do we make sure that any new affordable housing that does get built within the city is also benefiting the local community. And there's this practice of creating a housing preference policy is relatively rare, but not uncommon. There are a number of jurisdictions that do it. In this case, it would look at, the potential of people who either live and or work within the city. We'll talk in more detail about that. The way in which something like this would work is that it would apply to future projects that are brought forward through development agreements with the city or projects where there's city participation, in order so that may be embedded in that project as a requirement that the developer then is responsible for carrying out. The purpose, again, is really targeted towards mitigating or at least avoiding, in some cases, the displacement of people as the community becomes more and more unaffordable to live, having affordable housing, either naturally affordable, what's called naturally affordable housing, non-income restricted housing, just people that happen to be paying less than fair market rent. Those are the folks that tend to get impacted as communities grow and change. And so this would provide an outlet for addressing that. I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Jillian Glickman, who's going to walk us through kind of the policy background that was done, just to provide you some kind of framework, and then talk about what was discussed with the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Jim and Michael. Good evening, Mayor and fellow council members. My name is Jillian Glickman, Senior Analyst with RSG. So just to provide you guys with a little bit of background on this policy. So the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Department, otherwise referred to as HUD, does permit jurisdictions to establish these preference policies that prioritize applicants based on specific criteria, provided that these policies comply with federal civil rights and fair housing laws. This is important to note because local preference policies can have consequences that cause discrimination, even if unintended. Claims may be brought against a policy or practice that has a, quote, disparate impact on individuals belonging to a protected group, which means that it creates, reinforces, or perpetuates segregating housing patterns. So under the Fair Housing Act, there are 7 federally protected classes, including race, religion, national origin, color, familial status, otherwise known as the presence of children under the age of 18 in a household, sex, including sexual orientation and gender identity, as well as disability. Therefore, for tonight's conversation, the city must ensure that policies or practices do not have a discriminatory effect on federally protected groups, even if there is no explicit discriminatory intent. And then to talk a little bit about the progress to date in developing this policy that's before you today. Staff, in coordination with RSG, has taken the following actions to design the proposed policy. That included reviewing existing demographic conditions and housing prices within the city, conducted an analysis of applicable fair housing laws, and reviewed relevant case law on the topic. We also looked at comparable tenant preference policies that have been implemented throughout the state of California. And then, like Michael mentioned, we've also incorporated comments from the Planning Commission on the draft preference policy. So the next portion of the presentation will discuss the existing demographic conditions in the city of El Segundo, particularly in the context of displacement risk as it relates to this proposed policy. So first off, I'd like to show you this graph, which shows the renter versus owner-occupied housing units in the city, the percentage of housing units that are either renter or owner-occupied, and then for reference purposes, we put it against the County of Los Angeles. So the majority of housing units, or approximately 57% of housing units in the city, are renter-occupied. This is slightly higher than the percentage of renter-occupied housing units in Los Angeles County, which is approximately 54% of households. This means that households in El Segundo might have slightly elevated challenges associated with the rental housing market, particularly relating to rent increases, evictions, or displacement pressures resulting from the redevelopment of existing rental housing stock. And then this graph here is showing you the median household income in Los Angeles County compared to the median household income in El Segundo. So as you can see, the median household income in El Segundo is approximately $149,000, which is 72% higher than the median household income of Los Angeles County, which is about $86,000. However, I would like to note that approximately 13% of individuals in El Segundo earn less than $50,000 each year. So households with low income may face additional challenges as it relates to displacement pressures faced in the city, including inability to afford moving costs, such as security deposits, application fees, rigid credit and income screening criteria for market rate rental units, in addition to limited discretionary income to afford higher market rate rents that may be present in the city. This next slide here is showing you the percentage of rent-burdened households in the city of El Segundo compared to Los Angeles County. And rent-burdened households refer to households in which rent exceeds 30% of household income earned, while severely rent-burdened households refer to households in which rent exceeds 50% of household income earned. In El Segundo, approximately 35% of all households are rent-burdened, while 13% of all households are severely rent-burdened, meaning they're spending more than that 50% of their household income on their rent each month. These figures illustrate that a considerable share of the city's renter-occupied households are susceptible to eviction, homelessness, and even displacement in the event of income loss, unexpected expenses, or rent increases. So with that being said, the next portion of this presentation will discuss relevant fair housing and case law associated with these preference policies. And so as mentioned previously, disparate impact claims may be brought against policies or practices that disproportionately affect members of federally protected classes, particularly when the impact contributes to, reinforces, or perpetuates patterns of residential segregation. And then just to provide you of a few examples. So New York City adopted a community preference policy in 1988, which set aside 50% of affordable housing units in new developments for residents of local community districts. In 2015, however, a lawsuit was brought forward by plaintiffs claiming that the preferences made it more difficult for African American and Hispanic residents to move from segregated neighborhoods in the city to more diverse parts of the city, and therefore had an unintended discriminatory effect. The parties did eventually reach a settlement in which the unit set-aside requirement was eventually dropped from 50 to 15% of units. And then additionally, in the city of San Francisco, while it wasn't a lawsuit per se, the city of San Francisco adopted a neighborhood resident housing preference policy in 2015 to address displacement of low-income residents in the city. The policy reserved 40% of units in new affordable housing developments for residents living in the same council district, or within a half mile of the new development. In 2016, HUD reviewed the policy in the context of a partially funded HUD project and rejected the city's plan, citing concerns related to the neighborhood preference policy component. As a result, HUD and the city did reach a settlement that removed that 40% neighborhood set-aside requirement and instead allocated those units to residents from neighborhoods identified as facing extreme displacement pressure. And that was based on a study by UC Berkeley and UCLA to identify what areas those were in the city. So we bring this up to illustrate the point that tenant preference policies based on neighborhood residency particularly may carry increased legal risk. When implemented in already segregated areas, such policies can be viewed as reinforcing residential segregation by making it more difficult for applicants from protected classes to move into areas with greater opportunity and diversity in a portion of the city. And to withstand legal scrutiny under federal fair housing law, jurisdictions must ensure that these policies serve a substantial legitimate interest and are supported by data-driven justifications. So now with this information in mind, staff and RSG looked at a number of comparable policies to inform the creation of a tenant preference policy for the city of El Segundo, keeping in mind best practices that we saw across jurisdictions. So in our review, there were a series of key components within these comparable policies in which staff and RSG sought tailored consideration from the Planning Commission in order to guide the policy. These included questions about eligibility criteria, which defines the criteria applicants must meet to qualify for a tenant preference, property applicability, which specifies the type of housing developments and duration in which the tenant preference policy applies. For example, if it applies just during the initial lease-up or throughout the term of the affordability restriction. We also sought direction on the unit proportion identified in the policy, which determines the percentage of units within a qualifying development that are subject to the preference requirements. And then now I'll go ahead and summarize the direction that was provided by the Planning Commission on both the January 23rd meeting and April 24th meeting that RSG attended this year. So staff, in coordination with RSG, presented these core components of a potential tenant preference policy to the Planning Commission on January 23rd and requested policy direction on how to define each of those for inclusion in the proposed policy. Staff and RSG returned to the Planning Commission on April 24th with a draft policy that reflected the Commission's input and incorporated best practices identified through staff's review of comparable policies in other jurisdictions. The Planning Commission did request that staff incorporate the following policy components for each of those components that I identified earlier. So for tenant eligibility requirements, that would be local residents and local employees, including preferences based on specific employment criteria, which we'll discuss a little bit further in the presentation. For property applicability requirements, that would be city-assisted affordable housing projects throughout the term of the affordability restriction, not just only during initial lease-up. And then unit proportion, landing on 15% of units set aside for this preference policy. And I did want to note that the Planning Commission also requested that the City Council consider an alternative option in which additional employment criteria is omitted from the policy, and we'll also touch on that later on in this presentation. So now for the proposed policy. The tenant eligibility requirements include local residency, so preference is given to applicants with at least one household member who lives in El Segundo. Local employment, applicants with at least one household member who has received and accepted a bona fide offer of employment within El Segundo. And then as it's currently written, additional preference is given within the local employment preference criteria to employees of the city of El Segundo, including but not limited to public safety personnel such as law enforcement, firefighters, emergency medical technicians, and paramedics, in addition to employees of a school district who would receive additional preference within the local employment preference. On to property applicability. So what properties are subject to the tenant preference policy? That would be city-assisted affordable housing projects in which preferences apply both at the initial lease-up and throughout the term of the affordability restriction, ensuring continuous preference for city residents and workers. In regard to unit proportion, 15% of the deed-restricted affordable rental units that must prioritize these applicants. And I would want to note that the 15% was on the conservative end for comparable policies, which ranged from 15% to 100% of units in new affordable housing projects. In regard to policy implementation, the policy does outline that affordable housing agreements must include provisions for these policies. The project owner would also be responsible for enforcing this policy throughout the affordability period, including marketing the preference units with eligibility criteria, maintaining a list of eligible applicants, and ensuring compliance with the preference requirements, in addition to offering preference units based on a lottery system if multiple applicants are equally eligible for the units. This ensures that the project owner is responsible for both initial and long-term implementation, reducing potential burden on city staff, including time and resources. Additionally, at a later date, the city could consider implementing policies and procedures for policy implementation to ensure uniform application, as well as provide guidance to city staff and potential project owners. In terms of policy limitations, so the policy would only apply when other funding sources or other regulations don't prohibit it. It must also comply with federal and state fair housing laws. And then now regarding the alternative policy options that are proposed before you today. So as mentioned previously, the City Council may consider alternative language for Section 2B of the proposed policy. It's included as Exhibit B, which omits additional preference for public service employees, so that employees of the city component and then teachers component as well, or employees of a school district. This was included as a potential option at the request of the Planning Commission, since similar employment criteria was not seen in other comparable policies, but they did want to include it in the proposed policy. So as a result, that exhibit provides alternative language to ensure greater consistency with the intent and requirements of the Fair Housing Act and any other relevant federal and state housing laws. In evaluating this option, the council should consider that preference policies should not result in unintended discriminatory effects or disparate impacts on protected classes. Alternatively, the council could proceed with the proposed policy as demonstrated, provided that the rationale for such preferences included can be demonstrated to further a legitimate governmental interest without disproportionately affecting protected groups. So to wrap up the presentation, staff is requesting council consider the following. So consider the adoption of the proposed policy as approved by the Planning Commission with those additional preferences for public service employees. Alternatively, the council may choose to adopt the policy without the additional preferences for public service employees. Otherwise, you may provide staff with other direction. We're here for any comments or questions.
Thank you. Public service employees are covered in this either way, right? Because they work in the city of El Segundo.
Yes.
It's just adding extra verbiage. I mean, is it a multiplier?
Yes, it would be. So they would be given additional preference within the set of local employees that may apply.
All right, council questions.
I mean, that is my question, I guess. Is there a ranking of applicant preferences? So if you both work and live in the city, is there a multiplier?
We have not seen that being incorporated in other policies. Typically, they're separated into their own individual preferences, but they would be subject to or able to apply to the policy based on either one of those criteria.
And if it went into a lottery, everybody's weighted equally, essentially?
Yes.
Thank you.
The proposed 15%, that doesn't mean that there's a guarantee that 15% are going to go to either folks who live here or work here. It just means that they have to prioritize them, but if they get applications that don't meet the very low income requirement, they would not qualify, correct?
Correct. It would be eligible applicants that live or work in the city.
Okay.
And not just for very low, right? It's affordability at any level, whatever the level of the project is?
Yes, up to moderate income, so 120%.
So moderate in California right now is $85,000 a year for a single occupant for the people at home.
Not a question, more of an observation. But we expect RENA numbers, 600 roughly, 500? But we got another one coming up in 2 to 3 years, right? So let's assume we're at 700, and let's assume we build all those, then we're saying 15% of those, no? What are we saying?
It's a good question and good opportunity to clarify. It would only be city assisted, so there's no real way of knowing how many projects come over the next decade or so that the city would have a vested interest in.
Does that include development agreement as well?
It can.
Okay, maybe you could define city assisted a little bit further.
Could be a development agreement, could be a financial stake, waiving of permit fees, or I think there's a lot of different ways that could look. Anyway, yeah.
So let's say a couple hundred are city assisted, and 15% of those are looking at 30 units that would be available. So I only bring it up to suggest that, it's a drop in the bucket. It's good intention, but it's not going to solve our problem, which is that 13%, I think you said, fall below. Can't even, what was that number? That lowest?
About 13%.
13% are in like a serious rent burden situation, I think.
That's right.
So there's still going to be a significant gap, is the point I'm bringing up.
So if we looked at the Pacific Coast Commons, what are we at, like 300, 400 units possibly with
254, right?
254, and what was the low and medium?
It's 13%, so it's about 30 some odd affordable units.
13%. So then 15% of that 13% would get the priority.
That's correct.
Okay.
Any questions I have are really more legal questions. What are the chances that this is, that you challenged? Yeah, exactly. And is that part of the reason why we're only suggesting 15% versus something higher than that? Does that increase? Are we opening ourselves to legal challenge if it's beyond 15%?
Yeah, I'll let Mark opine on that.
I mean, I think there's gonna be some real question about, I mean, when you look at what the affordability is, I mean, and you look at the income levels, some of the suggestions, the people that were suggested to be given preference aren't gonna qualify. So, if you force them into that box, you're gonna get probably a successful legal challenge saying, well, they just won't qualify. So there's some statements here and some desires that they're just not going to work.
But that was my question, Mark. We're saying you have to prioritize 15%.
Right.
That doesn't mean you have to give housing to these people if they do not qualify. If you make more than the moderate income level and you work for the city, you now no longer qualify. But there are people who either live in town or work in town who would qualify, and then I think this would be a benefit to them. So, I mean, it's not mandating, it only mandates a preference. It's not an obligation to force somebody to make someone else move into that low income or moderate income unit.
Right. In reality, I think what you're gonna find is you're going to have some people that on an income basis qualify who may live in town, and they're gonna be in jobs that, pay at low income levels.
Right.
And that's not gonna be some of the groups that were talked about in the presentation.
No, I agree. When you're talking about city employees or even school district employees, they are going to be making more money, so they probably will not qualify. It's a nice sentiment.
Some school district and city employees that are in certain positions making below a certain level, but it's not gonna be a high number, no.
Right. But it could help those individuals.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, anyone can sue for any reason, but other cities have adopted similar type of programs. I think the presentation lays out that we have a high percentage of renters. We have heard stories of buildings getting remodeled and rents going up. So if we have the ability to help keep people who live or work in town be able to stay in town, I have no problem with this program. I would even propose maybe 15's too low. Because to Councilmember Boyle's point, if you're talking 20 units and it's 15 of that, that's what, 4, 6? But overall, I think it's a beneficial program that I would recommend we adopt.
Other council comments?
I have just a semantics question. Let's
Ooh.
assume this gets adopted and it goes into our municipal code. The live work to me is confusing because I will just associate that with a live work product type. So just, I guess if it's a preference policy, then that clarifies it. But I think that's a little, the wording is odd.
We can work on the sort of the naming mechanism. It won't wind up in the municipal code. This is a resolution only to adopt a policy. It'll be easier to quickly adjust and change in the future if we need to, but we can certainly work on the naming of it as well.
I agree. When I first saw it on the agenda, I was thinking of like a live workspace. I was like, what is this about? I'm astounded this is legal. I really am. No, I mean, when I first saw this in a town in Colorado where they had it was radically gentrified and they had all their public employees living in subsidized housing that weren't dorms, I was just totally astounded. So I applaud you for finding a way to do this. I have one really wonky question, and that's when we are we allowed to establish our own criteria for establishing affordability? So there's HUD guidelines when you apply for Section 8 and things like this, right, where you have to include all special pays and benefits, not medical benefits and things like this, but if someone has special pays, overtimes, mandatory overtimes, those all get factored into their income as opposed to just their salary. Are we allowed, when we establish eligibility on this, to just look at salary? Do we have to include longevity and special pays and all these things?
There's two answers to that question. Generally speaking, almost all affordable housing has some public subsidy in it, which has requirements in terms of what is considered income and how that income is treated when calculating affordability. So I'm talking federal, state, and even, regional, like the county. So more often than not, those are the things that dictate what is income, what is considered low income, and all of that. In theory, the city could pursue a project, not that this is financially practical, and on its own, provide assistance and essentially create its own affordable housing project without any other such funding. But you would also have to deal with the Fair Housing Act more globally, even beyond what we're talking about with a tenant preference policy here. So I think it might be difficult to do that, even if you had only local funding going into it.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, man. Yeah, I was just gonna say, so we've got our first affordable housing project ever approved on Pacific Coast Pacific Coast Highway, which is yet to be built. And if you ask the developers, it's not penciling right now, part of which is because when you have a high affordability ratio, it's much more difficult when you're not getting market rents, or you're not able to sell your property for market rents or market rates as well. It makes it more difficult to pencil from a unit economic standpoint. So knowing that we have $5 or $6 million from D.R. Horton earning interest ever since the school district sold that land, and we negotiated that deal for Housing Trust Fund, but we really don't have much set aside. The only affordable, program we have in town doesn't even qualify, which is Park Vista, which thanks to our predecessors was an incredible idea. And so I would suggest that we go higher on the ratio, like Mayor Pro Tem Baldino suggested, going to 50%, barring any potential legal implications. Because it's really the only thing that we can do at this point that's going to help our residents get into more affordable places right now. This is the only policy that I see outside of something changing the markets, interest rates dropping, some new redevelopment, who knows what. But right now, we're not going to really make a material impact on any housing, affordable housing, and also let's be realistic. In the near future, it's going to be incredibly challenging. So I would suggest we go higher on the percentage, closer to 50, as long as the city attorney says we're not.
I want to just clarify something just because I think there's maybe a misunderstanding about what the 15% is before we discuss changing it. The 15% is so this preference policy applies to all affordable housing. So if it's a 100% affordable housing project, it would apply to that 100% unit. If it's a project that has a 10% inclusionary component, it would apply to the 10% of the units. It does not change the percentage of units that are affordable or not affordable of a project.
Yeah, I'm absolutely clear on that.
Okay.
I recommend to increase the likelihood that it could be defensible, that you would not just focus on residents, but also workers.
I meant, one and the same, because as it's proposed, it's workers and...
The employees are covered in that.
So I'm suggesting use the same criteria, but raise it to 50%.
Because for most of our projects, that would take us from like 3 to 5.
I think 50% might be too much. I think not because of any bad intention of what we're trying to accomplish, just of others trying to paint us in a different light. I would be happy with 20%, but I think being more conservative, this is kind of a benchmark. And correct me if I'm wrong, if we are going to have a development agreement of any type of housing development, these numbers get negotiated during that process, apart and separate. This would be the benchmark we would have as a policy, so that if someone came, and maybe this is a good question, someone comes in and uses one of our housing overlays, they get building rights as a matter of right. There's no development agreement. There's no public hearing. There's no CEQA. They're just going to build. But this policy would be in place, correct?
Only if the city is contributing in some way.
So if they're using all state density and private funds, then this policy would not apply.
That's right.
So, okay, so this policy is now limited to where the city is either contributing financially, or we're working out a development agreement, or somehow contributing. But Pacific Coast Commons, had we had the foresight, we could have negotiated this in, but we didn't really contribute to that project, correct?
Right, but we had a DA.
We had a development agreement that allowed us to have a conversation and get some requests and some public benefits out of it. Okay.
And just to clarify further, unless the units being built are at the extremely low level, I believe. How do you know it's low? If we contribute money, if the city contributes money above a certain level, it triggers prevailing wage. So the state has not made it easy for government to actually contribute to housing without increasing the actual cost of construction.
Even if we don't own the land?
Yes.
Yeah, this is why, like, the LASA buys build $700,000 apartments. Because they gotta do a prevailing wage. All right, so I think we've talked it around. Would someone like to adopt a resolution, and would we want to set a percentage?
Time to
Who's
haggle.
wheeling and dealing?
Any other comments on percentages?
I mean, look, it's very rare to get sued in the state of California, so. That's contradictory to what I've said. Contrary to what I've said, but I looked at, I mean, I don't think the legal risk is that significant given the breakdown of our residents, what they earn, and the way we set it up. So I'm less concerned about that. I think 50%. We have 5 million set aside. I was talking to the city manager today. We can't, like, I learned that we can't even use that really in any material way towards a project because of prevailing wages. It's just not going to get done. So what do we, I mean, we have to find, I mean, last 2 times I was on the campaign trail, I heard loud and clear from residents, we need to do more to help them. We have never, we've looked at rent control. I don't believe in rent control. We have not done rent control. I don't think there's an appetite for that. That's what most cities will go to in LA County. LA City as a whole has that. Hasn't worked well for them, or Santa Monica, in my opinion. This is something that we can actually do that's going to help our residents that need it get into some housing. Not big numbers anyway, but it's, I think, the least we could do. So I would propose 50%, but anything's better.
So
than
you're
nothing.
proposing adoption of the resolution. Do you want the city worker multiplier in there?
I
Or
do
the school
not.
district worker?
I do not. I think that
You want
they're
agnostic.
They're generally well compensated with strong benefits and a pension to look forward to in the future as well.
Before we make a motion.
Oh, I just want to clarify that parsing the demography of the different institutions, like there's certainly employees here who would fall, a significant number of employees here who would fall below the moderate level.
Those city employees that would qualify anyway because they're an employee within the
Yeah, no, I agree. I just want to make sure. Okay. Ma'am.
Right. I mean, I'm still a little bit confused if they qualify anyway, why we need to say it again, but I'm.
Well, this was
table
given a
that.
special, this gives us an extra multiplier. This is like a
multiplier.
times 1.1 instead of times 1.
Okay.
Times 2.1 or something.
While I agree with Councilmember Boyles that we have an affordability issue, particularly for people who live and work in the city, I think when we see that it's at 13%, qualify as low income, if we're to go significantly above that, I do get concerned that we do open ourselves up to some challenges. So I'm comfortable increasing it to some degree, I think 20%. But beyond that, and listen, I'm pro developing affordable housing where possible and definitely prioritizing those who live and work here to some extent, but I just get concerned that that's an overreach and our good intentions could, fall prey.
City Attorney, we're going to go a little bit backwards on this so we can figure this piece out. We'll have a vote. Then you can read the resolution, and then we'll move to adopt your resolution, right? Because otherwise we'll be up here all night. All right, so are you going to move it, you're moving it at 50? Or do you want to move it at 20? Who's moving?
I don't want to make a motion for 50 unless there's at least one other person supporting that idea.
There's only one way to find out in Robert's Rules of Order.
He loves the motion.
I love the motions. Is anybody moving?
I'll move. Let's move some stuff. No, I appreciate the conversation, and I think we all have to. Our heart is in the right place, but the world that we live in leads me to make this motion of. I move that we adopt a resolution approving the live-work preference policy for new city affordable housing projects within the city of El Segundo, but modifying it to remove the super preference for district and city employees because they would already qualify as working in the city, and increase the percentage from 15 to 20%.
Now, remember, we're going to vote, then he's going to read whatever we voted on, then we've got to adopt what he read. Okay, do we have a second on the 20%er?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No, I was gonna go 50. All right. All right, city attorney, we could do the adopt the resolution at
I can
20%.
just read it, you won't have to vote again. A resolution of the City Council of the City of El Segundo adopting a live-work preference policy for a new city-assisted affordable housing in the City of El Segundo has been adopted with the changes that were made.
With the changes to the rules of order. Hensley's rules of order. All right, item 14, lights back on. This is the report on the long-term operations of Park Vista Senior Housing Facility. Director Allen, you are back.
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, also, ma'am, your glasses are in the aisle. I don't want you to step on them. You got it.
Good eyes. Thank you, Mayor. While RSG is here tonight, I thought it an opportune moment to have their assistance in addressing the question that Council directed staff to look into at a very high level, various operational options moving forward with Park Vista. It was brought up at the first meeting in April during council discussion with direction to take a look at several options to study different things that the city could pursue, from ownership to leasing, and I won't steal the rest of the show, but I'll hand it over to Jim to sort of outline the 4 general proposals or general directions that we can go in.
Good evening again. Jim Simon with RSG. So just as a matter of background, as we all know, the Park Vista is about a 40-year-old apartment building that was built and owned by the city. It's about 97 units, about 98% occupied at the moment, including one manager unit. It has units that are affordable to what would be 50% and 60% of area median income. Kind of going back to the earlier conversation we had on the other item about affordability. As the owner of a real estate asset, which is not common for a city, as you probably know, you also carry the capital needs of that building. And the last time that was looked at was about 7 years ago, when a physical needs assessment concluded that the property would need about $3.2 million of investment over the next 10 years. I don't know that there has been a great deal of that investment from our conversations with the staff. And just to put that in context, that exceeds the fund balance of the senior housing fund. So, you know, that's a unbudgeted issue. Since you talked budget earlier today, that would need to be updated and potentially managed. So that's certainly one of the motivations, if not there's others, for why the city might be looking at, you know, what's the best way to manage this asset going forward to make sure, one, that the units remain affordable and that the households are protected, as well as, you know, obviously preserving the affordability of the project as a whole. So we were tasked to look at several options, which we'll talk about. There were 4 options we looked at, and we kind of created some screening criteria to help you kind of think about these. Tonight we want to share some of our initial thoughts on that, and then, you know, get your feedback on that if you want to explore anything further, and we can discuss that. So the first is ownership and control. Like, how important is it to the city to own and control the building? Those are 2 different things. You can control it without owning it, for example. We'll talk about that. The financial impacts, I mentioned capital costs that the city was responsible for as the owner of the building. If you do not own the building and someone else does, that capital cost would be their responsibility. And that's certainly a consideration. The risk and liability, you know, in terms of compliance issues, repairs, operations, things of that sort. Right now, insurance costs, this is industry-wide. I know we all have heard about what's happened with insurance. That's an impact the city bears as a property owner and a property manager. And how is that going to be considered and dealt with? Affordability assurance, that's just, you know, the strength of the affordability covenants that need to be put into place and those legal commitments. And then the mission alignment, you know, where does this fall within the city's mission and goals and that type of thing. So the first option that we looked at was probably the simplest one, would be the city could sell the affordable housing project essentially and with a covenant that it remain affordable. And that would just be recorded on title. It could be a 55-year covenant. It could be longer. That's typical 55 years though. The benefit obviously is that you no longer are responsible for the building and you would get the proceeds of that sale. There would be obviously a transfer of operations, a transition period, you know, maybe same property manager, it could be a different property manager. And then affordability would be assured through covenants versus the way it's being done right now, which is essentially through the city's practices. So there would be assurance for the tenants, but, you know, obviously an impact in terms of potential change. The cons, as we've outlined here, you know, loss of long-term control, and that might mean not so much the things in terms of affordability, but things maybe such as, you know, painting, maintenance, and things of that sort, you know, minor things that might not otherwise come up in an affordability agreement. The compliance monitoring, that basically means that it's the responsibility of the future property owner to ensure that the households that are occupying those units are in fact low and moderate income households. There would be an annual reporting requirement that would be a burden on that property owner to make sure is being accomplished versus the city, you know, essentially doing that through its property manager today. There's the potential, limited interest due to the site restrictions. You know, this affordable housing is difficult. We haven't been in a more difficult, I think it was mentioned earlier, we've not really been in a more difficult time to build or own and operate affordable housing than the moment that we are in right now for all the reasons that I've mentioned earlier. So,
excuse me, why would there be tenant displacement?
Potential.
Why would there potential when? Like immediately? Why?
Well, I mean, there would be one of the things that would have to be worked out. It's a question, and it's not saying that this is a guarantee. But right now, the affordability is between 50 and 60% of area median income. Let's say the only potential buyer out there would be somebody who wants to bring down the affordability to a lower threshold. That might mean that at some point, households that, you know, are no longer income eligible might not be able to stay in the property long-term or potentially stay as, you know, an interim basis. So
couldn't we also put a covenant on there to protect their current residents that are in there? Okay, so
that's why it's a potential.
Okay, well, anything's potential.
Yes.
I just think
these are things, and these are all mitigatable.
I think it's a bit misleading on the intent of what this is. That's all.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So those are responsibilities of the city, obviously, when you go through that process. The second would be, you know, long-term ground lease. In this case, you would still own the property, but have a long-term ground lease. The basic change from the other scenario is instead of getting a lump sum payment up front, you would get, you know, payments over 55 or 99 years, whatever the duration of that ground lease was. So, you know, that's, I think, the primary difference in how this option would work compared to the second. There is also just simply refinancing the property where the city could take out debt to fund, say, a reinvestment in the property and improvements and things of that sort. You could get some cash back instead of having all the cash tied up in the asset and the real estate. That would, you know, could be used to manage that. And I think we've talked about, you know, obviously the cons are adding long-term debt to the city. I heard, you know, there's some excitement about the fact that you don't have a lot of long-term debt, so that's something to consider. And then finally, you could continue to maintain ownership as you currently do, partner with another, you know, operator that could help you more, you know, acutely manage the asset than maybe the way you're doing it today. That's also an option that's available to you. So there aren't really, you know, these are really high level. I think that was the idea, was like, what are the potential options? I think we've presented the range of possibilities here. I think the goal tonight was to hear from council to get a sense of what are your priorities with this property what's most important to you, and how might you guide staff based upon those priorities to what should be done next on that. And with that, I will turn it over to you all to answer if there are any questions.
Council, do we have consensus to receive and file, so don't forget this time? Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, we're receiving and filing. Okay. Ask away.
I got a lot to say, so if you want to start, you can go ahead.
Sure, I'll start. In terms of priorities, I will start the conversation by saying it's a personal priority to make sure that Park Vista has an extended, useful life. So I think nothing citywide concerns me more than capital improvements across the board. And this, to me, is sooner rather than later going to be one of those examples where we have to make a big financial investment because there are residents and people live there, and we need to make sure that it's preserved at, at the state that it deserves to be. Along with that, though, and not, below that, is not displacing tenants and preserving affordability. So my question in all of these scenarios is, which of these guarantees not just that we change ownership, but that there's a capital improvement investment with the preserved affordability and limited tenant displacement? So is there a scenario that you would recommend that guarantees us that we will have an investor, owner, or operator who makes that capital improvement?
I think the tenant issue is a lot easier to guarantee than the, is there somebody willing to take this on? Because the first thing that we would recommend doing would be what's known as an updated property needs assessment, because something from 2018 is not going to be very relevant, and anyone who's going to show any interest in the property is going to want to know what's the state of the building today and what needs to be invested in. That number is probably quite a bit higher for all the reasons that we can speculate. And then, see what the market, see who's interested, candidly.
Would you say there are certain programs, though, state and federal, that would necessitate a capital improvement investment? So, for instance, tax credits, in order to qualify, you would have to make a minimal, or I should say, there would be an amount that you would have to exceed in capital improvements, and it's pretty significant. So is that something that we could, dictate in part of the process, that along with preserving affordability, minimizing tenant displacement to the extent possible, there has to be some minimum capital improvement? Because I feel like that is kind of the genesis also for this conversation about why we want to move this forward.
Yeah, I mean, there's permanent tenant displacement and there's temporary tenant displacement. Obviously, if you're taking out somebody's kitchen and bathroom, that's going to be difficult to do while they're living in the space. So there's only 2 empty units last we checked. So that the tenant displacement may be a temporary one that may be unavoidable. We haven't been inside the units and buildings, and again, without the updated property needs assessment, it's really difficult to say how extensive that is and how important that is. If it's just replacing some minor things, or is it complete rehab, TBD. So I think that's why maybe one step perhaps would be to consider having that done, so you could get some facts in front of you, so you could maybe have an informed conversation about, wow, this is going to take a lot of work, and it seems like maybe temporary tenant displacement may be inevitable. What do we do in that situation? And then that would be another conversation. And then yes, that would come with how does a third party, if there's another buyer coming in to buy it, if it's, let's say, a nonprofit affordable housing entity comes in to take it on, how would they plan to finance that and all of that? Those things would have to get sorted out as you go out to the market and see what this interest is there.
Okay, well, first of all, we have a lot of Park Vista residents here. Thank you for coming. You've been here for 2.5 hours. And sat through probably way more than you intended. But thank you for coming in, and I'm glad that you're here because it gives me an opportunity to actually tell you exactly why I brought this up. And it was me, okay, who brought it up at the last meeting in a few weeks, say 4 weeks ago. But I want to give you the facts as to why I brought it up. And the facts are some things that you've heard tonight. We, as a city, are a terrible landlord. We're a city government. We don't know how to run buildings. We certainly don't know how to run senior living facilities. As a result, we have a third party who manages your property, who you all know very well, because it's been the same property manager for, I don't know, an awfully long time. Since Jesus was a baby, it's been a long time, all right? So it's been the same property manager. And you also have a board, which I always found interesting that the Senior Housing Board has absolutely none of you represented on it. Interesting, okay? So there's a couple things right there that when I look at it, I'm like, okay, this is not our wheelhouse as a city. And you also managed to have to sit through part of our budget session tonight. So you see that we have a potential structural deficit in a couple of years. We have $140 million worth of capital improvement projects that are in front of what is needed at Park Vista right now. So the way I looked at this is not a sustainable plan that we have as a city for where you're living. So in order to build a plan for that, I wanted to look at what our options would be. Because when we want to fix something, it's a city-owned building, it's a public building, it's going to cost 40% more. It's prevailing wage to fix anything. You sell it to a private company, it's going to cost them a lot less to do the repairs, theoretically, that need to be done. Because at this point, we're keeping this thing together with bubble gum and tape right now. We just don't have the money to do it. So as much as I'm looking at it as a city financial piece, the more important piece is this is where you live. So how do we make a plan, potentially, that improves your situation? So regardless of everything else you heard about me and why I brought it up, that is the flat out reason why I've asked this to be studied. Because I think it's in the best interest of both the city and the people who live there to look at what is possible. So that's the only reason. There's nothing nefarious about it. Trust me, if we sell this building, we're not making, it would be more or less trying to sell it to someone that had the best interest at heart to take care of this facility for the long term. So it's not a cash grab by any stretch of the imagination. The reality is, I think, Michael, we talked about this. The reality is it might be a situation where you're basically almost transferring ownership. You're not really making money on it, but you want to sell it to potentially someone who will not displace residents, respect the wait list that has been there forever, respect what's going on right now with the people who live there. So that was the idea behind this study. All right, so I hope that helps explain it a little bit more. That being said, the only way, when I look at these four options, the only one that makes it semi-affordable for anyone to actually make the improvements that are necessary is a sale. That's just what I see from what you're saying there. I'm not saying we should go that way. I'm just saying that's what I see up there. Okay. The long-term ground lease with sale of project, I mean, can you kind of get away with it where you're leasing it and now it's a private company that owns it and we have a little bit more say what's going on, but if improvements need to be made, they can be made at a regular rate instead of prevailing wage. Is that a possibility? Do you have more wiggle room there? I mean, you suggested it, so man, you gotta, give me your best. Give me your best.
I don't think that's necessarily gonna get you around the prevailing wage issue.
Okay.
Right.
So then 3 and 4 don't do anything. It takes 3, we refinance at what, 8%? And kill the rest of what we have, and then maintain ownership in a line with a partner. I don't know what that means because right now we have someone run it, we have someone managing it. So to me, it's 1 or 2 are the only ones that look like we could take a look at what it looks like from a bigger picture. Is it reasonable? Can we put the proper covenants to protect the people that are there, and hopefully make a deal that's in the best interest for the long term. That's how I see this but I do believe that we cannot afford to do nothing. The status quo is not going to get us anywhere.
A question for you, Jim. You don't think there's a market for a lease, a ground term lease, is that what you're saying? Or it was one of the options, but.
Well, I think, I wouldn't say there's not a market for it. I think one of the challenges is that you're hoping to transfer the capital responsibility to somebody else too. And so how does that affect the negotiation on the long-term ground lease for the city?
I think to Councilmember Keldorf's comments, and you have experience in this industry, there are organizations that could benefit from an entity like this, much more so than we could.
Yeah.
So I think it would be prudent to just see what's out there and go look at some lease options. I would hate to sell land. Who knows what's going to happen in 20 years from now? I mean, we could have who knows, maybe there's a new opportunity given the aging population for funds that come back to cities. Who knows what's going to happen in 10 to 20 years from now?
Yeah.
But I would hate to sell the land. To me, we have finite land available to us, something you can't get back. And I think it is, to Councilmember Drew's point, we should be looking at other options that are fiscally prudent. One should be a lease with very specific covenants in place. And I would think that maybe there's a nonprofit out there that would want to lease this, knowing that they've got a capital burden, but maybe there's some other financial incentive we're not aware of, that they could benefit from. So I would encourage us to look at that.
Mayor Protem?
I think the first step is going to be to do the facility assessment. We have to know what our obligations are to maintain and repair, and if it's been several years since it's been done, I would hope we can get consensus to find some money in our budget. Let's do that first. Let's find out what we're really talking about, because even before we go off to market, someone's going to want to see that document and see, what it is they're walking into one way or another. That being said, I would be hard-pressed to give up any control over Park Vista. And I would think in a city that has found ways to raise money for a pool, we can find ways to raise money for the repairs that are needed at Park Vista. But, as we sit here today, I don't have the information to tell you one way or another what's best, because I don't have enough information. So I would hope, we get a consensus we've already received and filed your report, thank you for that. But let's do a facility assessment at Park Vista. Let's find out what the costs are going to be and what repairs are going to be needed. I know from when I was on the subcommittee, they just did their mandatory inspection of the decks, and that came out okay. And that's normally a huge expense in older buildings built around this time. So that was, something that could have been very expensive on a prevailing wage and turned out not to be a problem. So my recommendation is we give direction to staff to, hire someone and do an assessment and come back and report. And then once we're looking at numbers, maybe it can fall in line with our capital improvements programs. Maybe we can move some things around and make some adjustments to that. But I don't think we can even consider going out to market or lease if we don't have the information to tell a partner or a leasor or leasee what it is they're leasing. So I'm okay with having a conversation. I think we're best served if we maintain this asset. And I would agree, Councilmember Boyles, we don't want to sell land.
Director Sassoon, didn't we just do an assessment on this where we just authorized it? I thought we looked at the plumbing a couple years ago, and then we're going back to look at the roof. I was totally backwards.
Yeah, they thought they were going to have to do plumbing, and it turned out that actually didn't happen. Is that correct?
Yeah, because when Director Berkman was here, we thought we were going to have to eat all the plumbing, and then we didn't have to.
Right, so the assessment that was done is 2018, but when Elias's team looked at it, the plumbing was no longer deemed necessary at this time, and I think as Jim mentioned earlier, that 2018 assessment's a little too old. Probably would warrant refreshing that assessment.
But that's not in the staff report, is
It's
it?
not.
Okay, so we're not actually discussing that tonight. Didn't we already approve something, or is that coming before us?
The assessment that Director Sassoon brought up earlier, I believe, is programmed for 2027.
Good evening again. So we plan to do a assessment of all city-owned facilities, including Park Vista, and we need to do a RFP for that, and we plan to do that this spring of this year. Going back to the discussion, I personally have been involved in looking at some of the projects that were talked about based on the previous assessment. It turned out to be not a need, basically. They were indicating that the whole plumbing needed to be done. And when I got into the guts of it, we didn't have to do that. I do know the roof is kept in pretty good condition. So all the balconies, the paint, the electrical, the lighting, even the retaining walls. But it still is good to do a new assessment because the one we done is old. So we plan to do the spring of this year, and not only just Park Vista, but all the city-owned facilities.
Maybe I can suggest, Elias, if the council desires, we can pull out just the Park Vista piece and do that in a shorter time frame.
I want to interject here because I was on the Park Vista board while I was in council. Plumbing was the vast majority of the budget. So now plumbing's not, you don't think it's really an issue?
Yeah, it's not needed because we looked into that. I shouldn't just say myself, but even the engineer that was working on the drawings. The plumbing is done with copper. Copper has a very long life. I built my own house in Texas 30 years ago with copper. It still is perfectly fine. I keep in touch with the guy who bought the house. So I don't think plumbing is an issue. One of the good things is the outfit that is maintaining the management entity that manages this. They really are good with respect to getting on and do the repairs as needed. And that is a big thing that they are doing, and they really, if there's any piece of plumbing that had leaked, they fixed it right away. The plumbing appears to be in fairly good, decent shape.
Thank you.
Can I add one more comment to this conversation?
You may, before I hog this microphone for 20 minutes.
That's what I was going to jump in ahead of you for exactly that cause. So something that we haven't talked about is, well, we haven't, but it's naturally occurring affordable housing, right? So we're not getting any state credit for keeping these units below market rate. And in a environment where we have 500 units, I would say half of those are affordable at some level of requirement, maybe just around 200. We know that's going to go up in the next cycle. And we have one project approved with 30 units. There's no way that we're going to make significant improvement on that without looking at the idea of having this be qualified affordable housing. It already is. So I do think that we need to also prioritize a way to get credit for having at least a percentage of those units held as affordable. Does that make sense?
35 odd years ago when people up here came up with this concept, it represented a novel opportunity to allow people at El Segundo to age in place. These were not stupid people. They understood it would be inefficient. They understood that cities are going to be bad at managing it. And they were willing to accept the cost of doing that. And I think people living there are willing to accept that as a cost of doing business. Cities are bad landlords. They are. But that's the cost of maintaining this. And if we're just staring down some plumbing and thinking about shaking up an asset over which we have complete control to allow our residents to age in place around their families, the communities they built, I think we should do that. So I appreciate that we are a curious council that looks at things. I'm happy that we have looked at this. I'm happy to look at it and file it away, and then sequester $3 million to fix this thing over the next 10 years. So my recommendation would be to do nothing except fix this stuff when it breaks.
I don't think we're very good at that.
We've done it for 30 odd years.
We're reactionary. And no knock on, Elias does a fantastic job. When something breaks, we fix it appropriately, but it costs more to be reactive in every instance than it does to fix something before it breaks.
Well, you can't prove a negative, right? If you fix something and it never broke, you'd never know. I had a buddy who never changed his oil. Car ran forever, right? So, look, the sophistry notwithstanding, I'm happy we can have them look at all the things we want. If this comes to the dais about taking action to change ownership, do a ground lease, change of management, go to RFP, I will vote no before you finish talking.
So I think the question we should answer for staff is, do we need to pull this out to do it in advance, or you're saying spring of this year, you're gonna have the RFP? And by RFP, you mean request for proposal for someone to come do all of the city facilities.
Correct.
As part of our capital improvement program that we do on a regular
Correct.
basis.
Correct, but we could just focus on Park Vista as the city manager suggested, and put that on high priority and focus on that as well.
It is a priority, but I also don't want to deal with things in a vacuum, right? If the Jocelyn Center has needs, like if there's a ton of facilities that the city owns that need to be included in this assessment, and then we can make judgment values on what other priorities are. So I'm happy to know that we're doing this. I wouldn't suggest that we separate it out just because I want to know what all the facilities look like so that we can do
otherwise
some long-term
we'll be
planning.
chasing the next thing to come on the dais to do a facilities assessment, because everything's important to somebody. So I think I'm happy to have received and filed. If we want to study other things, if we want to look at the rental markets and things, we can do that.
Well, I think I'm aligned with you in that based on the information we have now, we need to wait for this facility assessment. But I think that's already in the works, and I'd rather see it as a whole piece of everything the city is owning, so that we can look at some real numbers and some real data and then go from there. But I agree with you, Mr. Bear. I think we can find the funds to keep this thing going.
So you said spring, you talking about spring 2026?
No, before summer, we're gonna have the RFP out.
It's June.
I mean, I'm talking about next month or two. We're working on the RFP right now.
Might be technically summer, but we'll go there. I know what you meant. Okay, so you mean it's something that we're doing right now, so.
Yes, sir.
Look, again, I'm not wired into sell or not sell, but my point on this whole thing has been, we are reactionary. That facility right now is as good as it's ever gonna look unless we do something about it to plan for the future. So that's why I wanted to look at this. And if a facilities assessment is the best way to start that off, then let's at least know what we're up against and then form a plan from there.
All right, anything further?
No, I just want to change it. I think we're great landlords because we stay out of the way, honestly. And we've got a lot of residents that love that facility. So.
Can't prove a negative. Can't prove a negative.
And we also have a property manager that is, personally invested in keeping it that way. I can't guarantee that you would find another property management company that would be invested the same way.
I agree.
All right. Anything further?
I just wanted to clarify, the direction is no direction, we're waiting on.
We're waiting on our facilities to be assessed.
Correct.
Perfect, thank you.
All right. City Clerk, do you have anything to report?
I do not. Thank you.
Councilmember Keldorf, you have item 15, major events ad hoc
I
committee.
mean, can you even guess what I'm going to talk about? But this is the culmination of 4 meetings of talking around this. All right, this is the formulation of an ad hoc, major events ad hoc committee. It is item G15. It's in our agenda. Thank you to Barbara Voss and the city manager's office for working with me on this. So proposal idea is to create a subcommittee or a committee, I should say an ad hoc committee, to start talking about World Cup in 2026, Super Bowl in 2027, Olympics in 2028. As we have envisioned it, it would be a group that meets quarterly with working groups that pull out of that to tackle a work plan that to date would include a short-term rental policy, use of facilities for Olympic and professional training, public safety and emergency preparedness, and business development. Every time this comes up, there is another group that wants to be involved or something that we hadn't thought of, and I just feel like we have a lot of resources in town to maybe help a very limited staff in addressing some things proactively. It's envisioned to have currently 7 members, me as a council member, a Rex and Park Commissioner, Planning Commissioner, a designee from the City Manager's Office, somebody from Arts and Culture Committee, Chamber of Commerce, and a community member who has originated the idea. open to any conversation around it or just get me to stop talking about it by approving it.
I think it's a good idea. Thank you for spearheading this. My suggestion is that if you have so many committee members, it's going to be hard to get anything done. One, just like scheduling meetings is tough. I know on a lot of the subcommittees I'm on with just one other council member, those dates move. I would suggest you limit the number of individuals, but you can still have comment and input. I just think if you're having 8 people on an ad hoc committee or 7, it becomes cumbersome, and it kind of goes in so many directions. You kind of lose focus of your 3 main goals, which are 4, which I agree with. You know, what are we going to do as far as capitalizing on these events, and what does our short-term rental policy look like? So I would suggest that maybe you kind of slim down the committee to fewer participants.
There's no quorum requirement, correct? Because it's a
Correct.
subcommittee. It's a committee, not a subcommittee.
It's an ad hoc, so
Yeah.
you meet ad hocly, I suppose is the phrase.
And
But
then
again, it's not my subcommittee.
Yeah.
I wish you the best.
I got a call on the topics. The short-term rental policy, I don't believe this should be put in here, and here's why. We have a policy that we went through, I don't know how many meetings to get to, how many pilot programs to get to. I understand there's an appetite for people that maybe want to have it relaxed for that time frame, but I am also guessing there's an equal amount of people who don't want it relaxed for that time frame. So my feeling is if there's an appetite to bring it up to the dais to make a change, then let's bring it up to the dais and have a public comment or whatever and do it that way. I don't see how that is going to help the city take advantage of the events.
Well, there would be a TOT assigned to that. That would be significant.
Don't forget, we're also going to have TOT, and the hotels are going to be jammed up as
They're
well.
they're already operating.
Right.
I mean, this would be additional above and beyond that.
So then you have a city where half the people rent out their homes. I'm just saying, it's a bit of a slope. I'm saying that then I think that needs to be discussed here. I think you can have 15 people in there. It's not going to matter. It's still going to come down to the 5 of us figuring out what we think is best. So I'm saying if there's an appetite to relax it, I don't think that should be the focus of that ad hoc committee. The facilities and Olympic and professional training, absolutely. That's bringing more and more people here. Public safety and emergency preparedness, I mean, bottom line is, isn't that what Chief Avery and Chief Rodriguez are already working on? Like, what would be the input of the ad hoc committee on that? They're the only ones that have the expertise.
Right, and there would be a staff representative that is there in those meetings. Every time that this conversation comes up, for instance, at Arts and Culture Committee, the Cali Smash was there presenting. He's already working on something like this to rent out his facility during those periods of time. Then you have members of the chamber who are going, well, that's an amazing idea. Why aren't we in on this? And staff members. And so there's coordination that happens around that. And with all of those events that are planned, emergency preparedness will be part of it. So I think that that's going to touch on everything that this committee addresses.
Let me throw in just a bit on that, on the public safety piece. When LA 28 bid on this, one of the offerings was that they would require minimal to no federal support in that regard, which is patently ludicrous. So I think one of the things that we will need input around, and it's probably useful to have some input, because the chiefs will go to the meetings, but useful to percolate some of the ideas around, is they're going to come asking us for stuff. Right, the LA 28 will be asking us, hey, how many police officers can you give us? Do you have buses from Beach Transit that we can use? I mean, they're already getting 60-odd buses from Salt Lake City. Those are the kinds of things, the nitnoid pieces that nibble around. So maybe not safety planning per se, but different asks of what the city will contribute to provide safety around things like transit and stuff like that. I think it's probably worth it to just hear it out. but those are some of the things that nibble on the edges.
All right, so then the business development piece, obviously, so the hospitality, tourism related, absolutely, that's an important one. Then getting to the committee members, I wholeheartedly concur with MPT. You know, when I'm asking, like, when I see planning commissioner, why? I'm saying is I understand what it's focused on, but what would be the rationale? I mean, you were a planning commissioner for a long time. I mean, isn't that's also what's that bringing to the table? Arts and Culture Committee, why?
Planning commissioner. I was a former planning commissioner. I mean, they're there because of the short-term rental policy. I would say arts and culture and chamber are, you know, two of our key, actually, people with input. That every city that wants to participate in LA 2028, their lead focus is talking about arts and culture and how that's drawing people into the city. I mean, it was the focus of our last presentation at our ACC meeting. It's a driver. We live in LA County. City, we're going to be adjacent to the city. That's what
we live in El Segundo.
Well, we live in El Segundo, but during the Olympics, we are a spoke of LA 28, and that's what draws people into the city. I mean, if Art Walk was happening simultaneously to that, we would have a massive infusion of people for that alone.
Okay, I'm missing the rationale, because I understand an Arts and Culture Committee person, if we were using Arts and Culture Committee funds to, we were gonna, that's usually what happens, right? Like, we have a parks subcommittee meeting, and I thought initially that the reason why Arts and Culture was involved was, okay, anything to do with that particular thing, okay, we can weigh in on it. Instead, it's a full card-carrying member. So my point is, I think the idea of the ad hoc committee is fine. Like, I think we need it, but you're going to be in so many different directions. It's going to be very hard to get anything accomplished. But I guess that's going to be your deal.
So
and then how does it get reported back to here?
To both of you, if it was limited, you know, who would you're limiting it to 4. So who are those?
Plus, you have staff, right? So even like in our recreation, rec park subcommittee, there's what, 4 of us? 5 of us.
There's 5 members.
Plus staff.
2 or 3 staff.
Right.
Elias shows up. I was only making suggestions. This is your ad hoc. If you want to go with this, then I will support you. I'm just pulling from my experience of the various subcommittees I've been on. What I've found to be useful is to kind of keep it small and nimble and dedicated, and probably meeting more than once in a quarter. But this is an ambitious task because it's going to have a huge impact, and these are questions that we got to figure out. So thank you for doing it, and if you're happy with the form of your committee and what you want to talk about, I'm happy to.
And part of, I think, it growing is to actually, the idea is to take some of the burden off of staff versus adding it to staff. So,
sure.
You know, we have a lot of people who want to participate and have ideas, and the chamber has said that I want to be involved in that. And so rather than our, dedicated team of 2, give them some volunteer resources to help deal with it.
Again, I support you.
Anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move approval.
Sounds like I've just been walked
I'll
off.
second.
No.
God bless. If you want to take this on, God bless you.
Hoyle's on the first, Giroux on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. 5-0, it passes. Councilmember Giroux, over to you.
I think I've said enough tonight. Thanks.
Councilmember Boyles.
I got one item. We all received an email from a resident on Mariposa Avenue, and at risk of opening up the pilot parking program again, we can't even discuss it tonight, but I just want to acknowledge Mrs. Sitabaka's comments, and we changed things where we had that block of North Mariposa on a permit, and then we chose not to do that with this last go-around. I think maybe counter to what you had suggested, Mr. Sassoon. So either way, I'd like to bring it back and allow staff to figure out if it's worth addressing that, and if so, how to address it. That's all I have this evening, Mayor.
Mayor can put it under his name.
There we go. Mayor Pro Tem.
A couple items tonight. I went to the South Bay COG meeting, so I'm trying to get through this as much as I can. The Metropolitan Water District was there to tout their billion-dollar project to try to recycle water and recharge the water in the ground. They were using numbers from 2018 for this project that they said was going to be $6.4 billion, and then they admitted, yeah, it's probably more like $12 billion in today's dollars. Of that, they've got $200 million in grants they're going to use, so don't know how they're going to pay for that. Measure A funding, they talked about how they are looking at 6 times more money for homelessness. And the staff report talked about how we need to double our staff, but we don't know what the programs will be yet. So I asked, well, how do you know you need more staff? You know what the programs are, and they moved on to the next item. They talked also about using some of the budget to increase salaries because the minimum wage has increased, and so that meant that across the board, they were recommending and proposing an increase of staff salaries. The Inglewood proposal kind of morphed into a suggestion where they said, we're going to come back with numbers, we're going to come back with a plan. So it really wasn't much of a presentation, and it got approved for their idea of going with the bus lanes. And then at the end, there were nominations for the next president. And since I want to congratulate Councilmember for Giroux for not being there, I put your, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. In other news, I want to thank staff and Mr. Gass for the Civics Day. That's always a great event. It's great seeing the high school kids give their presentations and go give a day in the life of what we do here. I want to congratulate our Little League board on their closing ceremonies. It was another season in the belt. It was great fun to see the Challenger game on Sunday. Well done. And then one of the items on our consent was to appoint Mr. Jeff Wilson again to our South Bay investment board. So I want to thank him for doing that as well. And that's all I have.
May I ask a question, Mayor, of the Mayor? So are you saying the ITC, have they abandoned the rail idea altogether, or no?
Well, you can probably explain it better. They think there's going to lay the groundwork by creating a bus path that connects these metros, and then they can use this right-of-way to get to the metro. But honestly, my thought is like, it sounds like you build a bunch of venues without enough parking. But again, it was kind of just set up as, we're here, we're not really presenting it, we're going to come back with a bigger plan and more details and numbers. And so people were like, okay, we agree that you can come back and show us that. I don't even think anything was being asked to be approved, as opposed to just, here's what we're thinking we're doing right now for Inglewood.
They've effectively made the first phase of the rail project to be a bus project. And I think with a pretty good idea that there will not be a phase 2. But it's all a rail project. It's just with wheels and a road.
Robo-taxis.
That's right.
Excellent.
It's all robo-taxis these days. Ball bearings. A couple quick things. The Metropolitan Water, I'm glad you brought that up. There is a public hearing, or a public meeting on the environmental impact review on the 12th for the Pure Water project. Pure Water, again, is the LA sanitation side. So that's the one that'll be done first, as opposed to LA cities, which will never be done. But it's got a completion date right now of 2042, and that'll be about $18 billion and deliver less water, which is interesting. Also, just because you love my sanitation updates, they figured out how to pay for the lawsuit. Well, the lawsuit that they lost, they're now countersuing. So they had to write a check for $24 million. That's bad. On the plus side, they're countersuing for a bunch of things the guy did, so maybe we'll make that money back. Either way, there'll be a rate hike on the city, on the LA County side on sanitation. Several of us attended the PicoGrid ribbon cutting. That's awesome to see a homegrown company that made the full transition from starting out behind the dance studio, moving to Smoky Hollow, now moving east of PCH, doing tons of good things for both the private sector and the U.S. government. Those guys are fabulous, and we also found out that right over there, I know Mattel was talking about, oh, Corinne, you're still here. We talked about your new facility. Well, one of those buildings you'll be vacating, we've got a company moving in who has left California, during the pandemic and will now to New Mexico, will now be moving back to California, to El Segundo, because that's where awesome stuff happens. Spoke with the Mayor of Guaymas. They're interested in firing up our sister city relationship once again. So I will get some dates for you guys to box out on your calendars for that trip. And there's something else, but I don't remember what it was. Charter City stuff is maybe moving up on the schedule, so maybe we'll get that in before the end of summer. And
Yes, that's correct.
Ma'am. Oh, Medal of Valor, but didn't we cover that last time? I got lost in the sauce on this. Yeah, didn't we have the officers here? Oh, no, we were at Rotary. Oh, yeah, we attended we en masse attended the Medal of Valor ceremony where we had several of our officers recognized for life-saving. And, notwithstanding, I think it's kind of cool that when your city gets recognized on the law enforcement side for life-saving, because that means our crime suppression and crime deterrence efforts are working, that we don't have to do the valor stuff, right? We get to focus on the life-saving stuff, which is a testament to the day-to-day grind of police work. So that was very, very nice. And Madam Clerk, that was great. We sat there. We had Mayor Redondo and their chief. And other than that, we touched on Rotary yet? I'll hit that at the very, very end. City Attorney, anything from you? City Manager?
Yes, Mayor, just a real quick report on Hyperion. Over the past 2 weeks, AQMD received approximately 16 odor complaints, so number is going down, and there were not any notice of violations issued as a result of those calls. They continue to work around the facility to seek out any potential breeding grounds for mosquitoes, so they are still actively pursuing that. Also, this morning at around 7:45, they experienced a shutdown of the combustion gas turbine. They did inform us of that pretty quickly, and they were working on repairing that during the day. Also, the May edition of the Pipeline newsletter was released, and also and that particular newsletter, they're telling us, highlighted what happens when you report an odor to the Hyperion hotline. And then finally, they are also advertising now that they have an upcoming facilities tour on June 18th and July 12th. And please go to, and they sent me there's a link that's available right now that's called elsegundo.org/Hyperion if you'd like to sign up for the tour. That concludes the Hyperion report.
Mr. George?
Yeah.
What are we going to do about the City of LA effectively ignoring us when it comes to the plant manager? I have a hard time believing they just cannot find somebody if they're doing a worldwide search. Or if they're not, they should.
No, they continue, that they are.
This is one of the most important assets.
Yeah,
they have.
no, it's been.
The CEO, the GM of Hyperion gets paid a fraction of the salary of the CEO of DWP. Maybe they need to change that, but we've been talking about this. We wrote them a very public letter, and they've just been placating us all along. So what are we going to do up here? Are we just going to choose to ignore this, or I don't know?
No, I am in contact with the new person that replaced Ryan Jackson. They have selected a new recruiting firm. The new notice, job advertisement is being prepared. So, I mean, they do tell me they're working on the pursuit of the position. It is fully funded, even with the budget constraints that the city of LA is facing right now. So, I can draft a letter to the mayor's office, maybe from Mayor Pimentel.
Maybe we can go put this back in a closed session as well and talk about it.
Sure.
As a council.
Yeah, if we're going to consider doing litigation, let's go back to closed session for it.
Okay.
For the for our next meeting. Anything else?
That's it. Yeah.
I want to touch on the community service awards that Rotary put on. And one, it was great to have our staff recognized by both their peers and the community. But there was something that was said by multiple people who presented up there that ties into how we'll adjourn tonight. And that is about the nature of service and volunteerism in the community. And if you had been here 10 or so years ago, you could not have shown up at a single city event or school event or athletic event without Bethany and Peter Giannuso being there. I met Bethany through PTO at Eagles Nest, and then at PTA at Richmond Street, and then when Dash was playing Little League, when Peter was running Little League, and then we'd see him on the soccer field and the softball field, and they were quite literally at everything. And when we had a medical event at my house, and I had to take care of Laura, and I had 3 kids under 4, and I was staring at the wall like, how am I going to manage all this? Food and diapers just kept showing up. And that was all Bethany and Peter organizing it. And they didn't just do it for me, they did it for everybody. And Peter died on the 24th, age 52. He was a tremendous father of 4, and I adore them, and I know that we miss them, and I know even though they don't live here any longer, I know a lot of people in the city miss them dearly. So for Peter Giannuso, we will adjourn in his honor.